Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, my name is Mark, and this is my ultimate roguelike slash roguelite tier list. For those of you who don't know me, hi. I really like roguelikes. In the past, I've had the chance to playtest, design, played 1,000 hours plus of these roguelikes. I've actually made an extensive analysis video on roguelike design that you should definitely check out if you haven't already. Link probably in the description below. All right, so let me explain quickly how this is gonna go. First off, let's get the obvious out of the way. This is my list, my personal opinion. If you disagree, then good. Let's have a conversation. I do want to mention that I tend to only buy games with very positive reviews. So even if a game is on the D tier list, odds are it's not a bad game. It's just one that I personally haven't truly enjoyed. Also, all of the music you'll be hearing all come from these roguelikes. You can find a link to each track individually in the description. All right, without further ado, let's jump to our first game, shall we? First up on our list is 20 Minutes Till Dawn. 20 Minutes Till Dawn is a top-down like shooter twin stick single level layout game where you're trying to survive 20 minutes until dawn. And this is a great game to start off with because this is like perfectly mid-tier like fine game to me. It's a pretty straightforward, easy game to just pick up and play randomly. You get to always pick different characters at the start and different weapons. Both of them can create really unique runs from the start, which is great. So you'll always be starting off pretty unique, which is always fun for these kind of like quick games like these. That being said, if you've played this game for more than like 20 hours or so, which is already a nice amount, you'll realize that most of the builds are usually always the same. If you go for the frost build, you're always going to get the frost stuff and la-di-da. But it does get super chaotic really quickly, which is always fun for these kind of games. And so it's always enjoyable. This is one of the games that you can actually kind of crash the game, not too hard, which is always fun. So for me, this is like a solid, like nice like game to start off with. All right, next up, we've got Across the Obelisk. This is our first deck building roguelike, and we're gonna have a few of those on this list. And there's quite a trend with deck building roguelikes. They usually all have similar gimmicks. You're always gonna see like similar cards from one game to another. You know, like one card blocks damage, one card deals damage to the enemy. You've got your mana to spend, all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see how roguelikes, deck building roguelikes, try to have their own identity. This game, just like a lot of these deck building games, are pretty complicated. There's only like a single game out there that I would recommend to get started with deck building because there's a lot of information generally. This one, the unique gimmick is that you play 4 characters at the same time, which can be, once again, pretty overwhelming. You have to manage their placement, and that really takes a big part in the game. Also, all these deck building games usually have 2 separate parts: the actual gameplay where you fight and use your cards, and the outside world, just like right here, where you get to explore different areas and events and actually get into fights. And I think it's really important to have a good balance of both. This game does an amazing job with the outside gameplay areas. The world feels super engaging, very immersive, which I love. I really felt like I was in an adventure playing this game, which was awesome. Also, I really like the art and the animations. Usually the animations for these games are pretty minimalistic anyway. This one's really cute and fun, so I really enjoy it. Once you've played it a few hours, it's really fun. There's a lot of different characters, a lot of different cards, a lot of different builds, possibilities. I really, really enjoy this game. In terms of deck building games, this one does a really, really good job. I'm going to put this as a solid A tier that I would not recommend if you're not used to playing deck building games, though. All right, next up, we've got another deck building game that's actually really similar to the last, surprisingly. This is Arcanium. You have 3 characters to control, a ton of characters. Like, my goodness, the amount of characters you can play in this game is insane. There are so many different builds and combinations, just like a lot of these games, to be honest. Also quite overwhelming, very strategic. I love the art of this game. You can see there was a lot of effort put into it, but I'm not a fan of the animation. This is a little small thing, but anyway. In terms of strategy and like the actual gameplay, this is really, really fun. Very challenging. I've played this a lot. There's a lot of replayability. I've always enjoyed trying to find new combinations of characters. Most of the uniqueness comes from the characters in this game. There's just so many of them. The outside world is kind of minimalistic. It's more just like you're on a board, almost like a board game. So there's not too much to do or explore. The events are kind of always the same, but the gameplay itself is really great. It's kind of funny, but I'm also going to put this one as an A tier. Once again, not a game I would recommend to people that are not used to playing deck building games. There's just a lot to keep track. Don't worry, there is one game on this list that I will always recommend if you want to get started in deck building games. And if you know these games, you know which one I'm talking about, which we'll get to in quite a bit, I think. Okay, next we've got Astral Ascent. This is kind of unique because this is a currently while I'm doing this video, this is still not fully released, and I don't usually play games that are not fully done and are just like on beta or alpha. But this game I've been seeing footage for years and years. I've always was interested, and then they released a really big update recently, and it just looked so freaking amazing. I had to try it, and I've got to say, my goodness, does it look absolutely amazing. I mean, you can just see it right now. I mean, gosh, the animation, the visuals, the art is mwah. I love it. They put a lot of care into their characters. They kind of take like a Hades approach where they try to make they put a lot of care into the plot and the characters. But what about the gameplay? The gameplay is awesome. This is a 2D action roguelite where you, just like Hades, you explore different rooms, and each room will have different rewards at the end. This is definitely a roguelite. There is a ton of things to upgrade in the hub world. Like, my goodness, every time you come back from a run, it's like, oh, hey, there's this new character that you can now talk to upgrade this thing, and then this thing, and then this thing, and you're like, whoa. But it doesn't matter. This game is freaking awesome, and I cannot wait to see how it's going to be upon fully release. You feel like an absolute like wizard, cool like ninja kind of vibe. It's very quick, very flashy, super satisfying. Every spell, every hit is very, it feels so good. It just feels amazing playing Astral Ascent. So I would strongly recommend this one if you're a fan of fast-paced action roguelikes. I cannot wait to see how it's going to be once it's fully released, because already I'm loving this. So this is going to be an A tier. I'm going to put this, I think I'm going to put this above Arcanium. Across the Obelisk is really, really sweet. Very different genres, which is kind of fun to rate for myself. Next up, we've got Backpack Hero. Backpack Hero is a pretty unique game. This is a turn-based item management roguelike. What does that mean? Basically, you have your own backpack. You can fill it with items that you can use during battle, but depending on the placement of these items in your inventory, it's going to have unique effects, and you can do some cool, unique combinations between runs. You start off with different characters. Each character has drastically different ways to play the game. Like they're almost completely new games every time you play a new character, which is really impressive. You explore this dungeon, you collect rewards, you collect things to put in your backpack. You go on until you reach the final boss, and rinse and repeat. It's a roguelike. If you haven't seen my video on the video game design for roguelikes, then well, you'll know that I love the idea that we're going for with this game. I really do. But the more I played it, the more I realized that one major issue I have with it is that a lot of the items that you're going to be seeing through each run are completely useless to your build, because basically a lot of the items are so specific to other builds, which can make it pretty annoying. You just find a bunch of items that you can't even use. That's a little frustrating. The builds are fun, but there are definitely some broken builds. It's pretty easy to feel completely overpowered, and if you don't get the right items, you're not going to be very strong. I'm not a huge fan of the dungeon exploration, as you can see up there. It's pretty minimalistic, which is fine because most of the focus was really in the gameplay itself. I played it a few times, and I've enjoyed my time, but I do struggle trying to come back to it because, once again, it does feel kind of like all in or nothing kind of game. But I love the amount of effort all the different characters. My goodness, this game has a lot. So if you think you would enjoy these turn-based strategy games, give it a try, because it's not for everybody. Some people love it. I would put it as a C. Next up, we've got I found this recently. This is a small game called, I think, Binding of Isaac or something like that. Yeah, it's all right. I'll put it as a D or a C. No, I'm kidding, of course. The Binding of Isaac, one of the many, well, not many, one of the games that helped bring back roguelikes and roguelites to the modern age of gaming in general. What is there to say that's not been already said? This game is probably the most filled, most packed roguelike currently on the internet. There is so much to do. There are so many characters. I mean, I could talk about so many aspects of this game for so long. The level designs are amazing. That all the different characters play so differently, and there's so many of them. There's so many items, and not only that, it still feels kind of balanced in a game that is supposed to try to make you feel completely overpowered every now and then to make you feel pretty good, but there's still so much to master. It's incredible the amount of stuff you can do in this game. My goodness, if there's one game that I could play forever, it would probably be Binding of Isaac, because it never gets old. You can always come back to it. It's so great. I mean, of course, this is an easy S tier. There's no doubt about that. I've played over 300 hours of it, which I know for some people is not much when talking about Binding of Isaac. I actually haven't played that many of the newest content, but they're still releasing new stuff. Like, my goodness, this game has been out for how long? I don't know, but it's still getting new stuff. If you haven't played it, what are you doing? You should go play Binding of Isaac if you like roguelikes. And if you're watching this video, you probably do. So, yeah. Next up, we've got Blazing Beaks. This is a pretty interesting game. This is a top-down shooter where you play as different birds that with guns, you kill enemies and you progress. Now, the unique aspect of this game is that every enemy has a chance to drop a cursed item that only has downsides. There's no upsides. They're just really terrible. And the question is, how many do you want to grab before reaching the shop, where in the shop you will have a chance to exchange these terrible items with beneficial items that actually are useful. So that's a really cool concept and gimmick to the game that I praise, definitely. Now, how's the game itself? Well, unfortunately for me, I think this game has a lot of like design issues and balance issues. First off, you never feel particularly powerful, which is fine. You don't have to feel overpowered in all these games, but it doesn't really feel very satisfying progressing through any of these runs. I've played maybe 10, 15 hours of this game. I finished it a few times, and I never felt super powerful from like compared to the start. Also because a lot of the items you get in exchange at the shop are not super powerful or not super like game changing. They're also all random. So once you get a bunch of them, all of them might be completely useless, which doesn't feel great. But you never feel really powerful in this game, which is kind of annoying. Also, you only have like 2 to 3 health. So when you get to a new area, if you've never been to this area before, odds are you'll just die because you don't know the enemy's attacks, which can feel really annoying. So every time I would reach a new area, I'd have to try to learn the patterns before being able to do anything, which was really important. Otherwise, I would just have to restart everything. I didn't really have a ton of fun playing it. I love the idea they went with it and the art style, and actually the sound design is amazing, which is kind of like a little thing. But I love the sound design of this game. It's very cute. But not a huge fan of the game itself. I think they could have done a better job. It didn't feel as impactful between runs, even depending on the different characters you'd play or different weapons. Meh. Not a huge fan. I'll put it as a D. But again, if you like it, good for you. I still really respect the game itself. Yeah, the curse mechanic was really interesting, absolutely. I think there was more design put into the curses than the actual rewards you would get. So like some of the cursed items like were really unique. It's like, oh, this is a really cool negative effect. But the reward were just super underwhelming every time. All right, next up we've got Boneraiser Minions. Similarly to 20 Minutes Till Dawn, top-down a single level layout where you play as a Necrodancer, which is kind of interesting because basically you don't have any abilities. You just raise minions to fight for you. You yourself is super weak. The game is really interesting because for a game that looks so simple, you would think that it's a pretty straightforward game to get into. No, my goodness, this is one of those games where in the hub world area, you have so many things to do. There are so many upgrades, so many different things to buy. You can customize the level, you can customize traps, you can customize even the enemies, you can customize your minions, you can customize the Necromancer, you can customize spells. There's so much to do, which does not look like this kind of game would have so many things to do. So when I first played it the first time, it was okay, and I just kind of like dropped it because there was just too much information and too many things to buy, and I was like, this is weird. And when I got back to it and actually stuck to it, I realized there was so much to do, and it was actually so fun and crazy to see all the different combinations, which is just so unusual for a game like this. There's so much content in this. I'm so surprised. This definitely feels like the kind of game where once you see the crazy builds you can get to later down the runs, you're only going to be experiencing them once because they're all the same. If you go for like if you go for a vegetable minion build, the final version of this build is always going to look the same no matter the run. Same for demon builds, same for zombie builds. They always are going to end up the same place. But getting to that point the first time is amazing. So this just feels almost like a campaign mode where once you've seen everything, you're done, but you've had an amazing time. So even though the game theoretically is fairly short, 15 hours or so to see everything, I would honestly recommend it to people that want to see some chaos. So yeah, this game really surprised me. It doesn't look like much, but I'm going to put it as a solid B tier, probably right above 20 Minutes Till Dawn. All right, next up we've got Brotato, another one of those top-down single-level layout games. My goodness, there's a few of these in lower alphabetical order. This one is so much fun. My goodness, this one is pretty unique in the way that it handles characters. First of all, you have like 40 plus characters, maybe even more. Each character played drastically different, but each character will come with huge upsides and downsides, which means you really have to manage your runs depending on the character you're playing. And similarly, each item that you're going to be buying in the shops all come with downsides and upsides, which is really cool to manage. So even though you're going to be seeing the same items and the same enemies, the amount of customizations you can do in your character builds is so much fun and so crazy. This is one game that I've played so much more than most games on this list recently because it's such an easy game to just pick up and play. Also great for the Steam Deck because the game shoots and uses the weapons automatically for you. So it's just a matter of walking around and collecting stuff and just seeing the fireworks, which is honestly really fun. But I would say this is one of the better single level layout roguelites out there. Also, this is more of a roguelike. I mean, you do unlock characters and items, but you don't unlock like upgrades. So it's super easy to pick and just have fun with. I think it's really well done. The sound design is great. The music is great. The animation and the enemies is, while very minimalistic, it fits just fine. I wish there was a little bit more in the enemy variations, but to be honest, everything is so focused on the gameplay itself that I'll give it a pass. It's really entertaining. I'm gonna give this a solid A tier. Honestly, I played this so much. I'm gonna put this above Arcanium. It's hard to compare to like a game that has so much content like Astral Ascent, but yeah, love Brotato. You should definitely pick it up. It's probably super cheap and super easy to get into. Very fun. Would recommend. All right, next up we've got Captain Forever Remix. This is a pretty unique game. You build your own ship in space. You fight other ships, and you collect parts from the ships that you've fought, and then you progress into different universes. This is not a game that many people know. I thought the concept was really unique and fun, so I tried it. I even came back to it a few times because I struggled playing it the first time, and unfortunately, I still struggle playing it. The idea is pretty unique, but there's a few issues I have with it. Mainly the fact that when you fight against another ship, you're gonna collect parts. First of all, you can't pause the game, so like you might get attacked by another ship and you can't even grab the stuff in time. And the biggest problem is this game is fairly long. Like each run can last up to like 45 minutes. And if you at one point randomly just get most of your ship parts destroyed, or like your favorite weapon destroyed, then you're just gonna be at a disadvantage. And you're gonna try to defeat these more powerful ships to try to get their weapons. And if you don't, you just lose. But in any case, if you lose parts, you're just gonna be at a huge disadvantage for the rest of the run. And it feels really bad. Unless you get a perfect run, losing parts in this game feels terrible. Because there's no actual progression system through the run. If you lose your parts, that's it. You're as weak as you were when you started the run. So the pacing is really weird. Also, the level layouts themselves, the level design it's literally Dead Space. It's just pretty much nothing with ships you randomly encounter. So it gets tiring pretty quickly. I could imagine this game, if it was multiplayer, being interesting. Maybe there is a multiplayer mode. But again, I'm going to be reviewing these games as a single player person. So I was not able to have a lot of fun with it. I like, once again, the idea, the concept is pretty unique. I think this is more of an older game already, but I wasn't a huge fan, so I'll put this as a D tier. All right, next up, we've got Children of Morta. This is a... what is this? This is an action-adventure roguelite where you play as an entire family. Each run, you get to select one person from the family, like the father, the mother, the son, the cousin, and you go into this adventure to try to, I honestly forgot the plot, but I think the world is in danger, and you're trying to save the world, and everybody takes turns just trying to get more information and going further down the dungeons to try to save the world. I think this game puts a lot of care and attention in their characters and the plot and just the family. The vibe is so cute. I remember when I was playing this game a while back now, but when I was playing this game, I honestly loved finishing a run and going back to the family to see what everybody had to say and see how everybody was doing. In terms of the gameplay, I remember it being okay. It got fairly repetitive. Also, it's massively roguelite. You really need to upgrade your characters in order to make any sort of progression, which again can be really fun in certain scenarios. But in this game, it felt like I just wanted to reach the next area, and I had to grind in order to have the right abilities. At least that's what I remembered. I do believe they've had a lot of updates for this one, and that's cool. I'm not planning on going back to this one, because I feel like I had a cool experience at first, just experiencing the whole like relationship vibe between each of the family members. The art style is really cute and really nice. I love the pixel art, but during gameplay, it can get a little confusing because a lot of like the flashy, fireworks, just like the fire effects and any effects in general can blend in super easily with the environments. So it was kind of hard to see what was going on when there were a lot of enemies. Which is a shame because I love the way it looks. The story aspects really brought to life the story aspects. But I remember once again that levels felt pretty repetitive. The level designs were kind of boring after a while. So I think it's a pretty good game. I kind of wish I could forget it and come back to it with a fresh mind to see if I could change my opinion of it. Because I feel like I've experienced it. It's the kind of thing you experience once. So I think it's good. I'll put it as it's a B game. All right, next up we've got Convoy. Convoy is an FTL wannabe, which we'll get to. This is kind of like a real-time strategy game, roguelike. This is definitely a roguelike, where you have a convoy. You're exploring this big world, trying to find different scraps and different items to bring back to your ship so you can leave the planet, I think. It's pretty unique, and the strategy aspects are fairly unique. There's not many games out there like this. FTL obviously is the one that started it all for roguelikes, if I'm not mistaken. In terms of the gameplay itself, it's all right. There's actually not a huge amount of strategy during the gameplay, during the fighting sequences that I've realized. I want to compare it to FTL all the time, but which we'll get to. But the thing is, since you always start pretty much the same, and you have different layouts that you can unlock the more you play, but You're always going to be starting with just a few vehicles that are going to be defending your cargo, and you just click one place and you have them shoot the enemies. There's not too much to do for a while, which is kind of annoying. There's not too much strategy for the first like 15 minutes of each run, which can be a little repetitive. There is strategy once you get in the late game, but it does take a little bit. The outside world is also kind of boring, to be honest. Don't mind that. That's just in the trailer. I didn't even know that was gonna be there. Yeah, that world here, it gets really lonely. It gets really empty. You can just explore and find little signals around to create different events, but it's nothing super engaging in my opinion. I've played a few runs of it. I've beaten it once, and I was like, cool, fun. I'd rather play FTL. I like these games. I think they're pretty unique. Even just in the genre itself is pretty unique. So I respect that. I could see myself playing it maybe in the future once or twice because it's super easy to just play quickly. You don't. It's not a roguelite, so you don't have to worry about remembering like different upgrades and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll put it as a high C tier, probably like a little between high C or low B. Okay, next up we've got Crab Champion. Crab Champions, sorry. This game is a meme. This game got popular at one point because it's all from a meme. It's a third-person 3D shooter game where you play as a crab with a gun. What else is there to say? Visually, it looks pretty great. The 3D animations and everything. Honestly, I feel like the trailer looks better than the game, which is not impossible. But anyway. This game was made because it was a meme, and the person, it honestly feels like someone had the ideas like, hey, the meme is great, I'm gonna make a game out of it because why not? And it got a lot of success out of it, but the game is horrendously balanced. My goodness, this game is so poorly balanced. I was really impressed to see how many great reviews it had, even though the game honestly felt kind of underwhelming in the balance aspect. Like, it doesn't really matter for some people because it's just a joke anyway, but I was still kind of surprised with how much recognition it got when it was released. Now maybe they've done some updates. I didn't check recently, but still there's just a lot to fix in this game. I remember the first time I played this, my very first run, I got an infinite run. I was completely overpowered. Some items are insanely powerful, some are completely useless. So that by itself really does hinder the game quite a bit. But it's still visually really entertaining. It's funny, let's be real. It's a really funny game to see and to play. So I might come back to this game in the future because I want to see if they would actually fix a lot of these obvious balance issues. But until now, I'm going to put it probably as a high C tier for me. Okay, next up we've got Crypt of the Necrodancer. This is a rhythm-based roguelike. It's top-down like dungeon crawler where you have to have all your actions are to the beat of the music. And so I was always I remember really looking forward to playing this game because I'm a musician myself and a drummer. And this game is really popular, and I don't know what to say. I suck at this game. I'm terrible at it. I've tried it like 3 separate times throughout the years. I'm always so terrible at it. I guess it's just me. But to be honest, this game is really hard. For a random person to just pick up. The game is super fast paced. You have to think of so many things at once constantly. And one of the actual issues I have with this game is that whenever you get to a new area, you're gonna have new enemies that are gonna have different patterns. If you don't know these patterns by heart, it's gonna be really hard to progress. Basically, I could imagine that if you know every enemy by heart, you'll know exactly which actions to take while the music is going and going and going. Your brain needs to be on fire for this game. But I also know I'm not great at it. I don't know why. I kind of wish I was because I love the fact that everybody likes this game. I think it's great to have a rhythm-based roguelike be so successful. But this is my personal experience. Even though I love the design of it and I really respect it, I really struggled playing it. I don't know what to say. I don't want to put it at a low tier because I think there's so much in this game. There's a lot of different characters. There's not the crazy amount of items, and throughout your runs, you don't really encounter crazy builds. This is definitely just straight from the start. You just got to be comfortable with the game and go with it. So you're never going to feel completely overpowered. You just have to master the game. This is definitely a skill-based game, so I guess it's not for me. So yeah, I'm going to put this as a... I can't put it as a C tier. I'm going to put it as a low B for me. Soundtrack simulator, yeah, of course. The music is phenomenal. That definitely helps. Okay, next up, we've got Cult of the Lamb. This is a management sim mixed with a action-based roguelite. Half of the time you're going to take care of your little village, your cult, and the other time you're going to be exploring different forests and areas to collect different materials and different followers for your little village / cult. If you've seen my video, then you'll know already what I'm going to say about this game. But basically, this is one of those games that they tried to combine two drastically different design approaches. The action roguelike with the management sim kind of game. And unfortunately for a lot of these games, combining two drastically different design, while really cool and I really respect them going for it, means that it generally means that each style is not fully fleshed out. I honestly think the management sim, the building aspect is pretty underwhelming, and same for the actual gameplay, the action aspect. I'm not a huge fan when you go into runs. First of all, the runs are super short because you have a village to take care of, so it's really quick, which some people can like. I thought the action aspect just felt a little underwhelming, and since it's so short, it doesn't really matter if you feel like you had like a powerful run. It's kind of annoying when you feel like, oh man, I got a really cool combination here during the action sequence, but I'm done in like 3 rooms. So some people like that concept. I wasn't a huge fan of that, but my goodness, the art style, the visuals itself are just so amazing that I got really invested in the actual cult and like the actual characters. I always was looking forward to going back to my village to see how everybody was doing and build more stuff for them. Even though the building aspect were kind of minimalistic, all things considered, I really loved doing it. And also there's a little map. There's not that many different locations to find, but just whenever I would find a new location on that map, it felt so amazing because I was really into the whole world aspect of the game. So gameplay-wise, not a huge fan, but I did really enjoy playing it, and I would recommend this. And not to mention, a lot of people really do enjoy this game outside of my criticisms. Some people don't have these issues, so for them, good. For me, I'm gonna put this probably like above Children of Morta. Yeah, I got really into it. It does feel a little bit. It definitely feels that once you've played the game once, going back to it, meh, I mean, yeah, you can continue building your village and your cult, but if you finish the game, odds are you've already built a lot. But again, they've released DLC, I believe, and new stuff, and I might come back to it. Who knows? They put one half of 2 games together. Yeah, exactly. A lot of games. There's a lot of games that try to do this on this list, and I feel like most of them, if not all, I'll see, unfortunately fall flat because of it. It's really hard to have 2 combined like genres at the same time constantly. All right, next up we've got Curse of the Dead Gods. This is a fairly basic third-person action dungeon crawler where you play as this kind of like Indiana Jones kind of figure. You can choose you have different weapons, different abilities, la-di-da-di-da. The unique aspect to it is the curses. This is really heavily dependent on curses. Everything you do in this game, almost everything, will have a chance to make you cursed. Whether it be opening doors, buying stuff, upgrading stuff, you're gonna get cursed through your runs. And the curses, like a lot of these games, have big downsides and big upsides. And you really have to adjust your runs to it. They really put a lot of focus on that concept, which I think is really fun. And then the gameplay itself is amazing. my goodness, if you haven't played this game and you want like a nice solid action experience, Curse the Dead Gods. The VFX are phenomenal, the visual effects. Every action feels crisp, feels super meaningful. When you have a heavy weapon and you swing that huge hammer, oh, it feels amazing. That by itself really does make me want to come back to the game. Visually, it looks great as well. Bosses are great. The enemies design, super unique. Very challenging game, as you would expect from a curse concept. I mean, it definitely has a lot of risk reward. It is not easy. There's a parry system that is really, really unforgivable. You always have to be mindful of your stamina. It's really tough. I've completed this game once after like 20 hours of gameplay, maybe. It takes a while. Definitely, it's also a roguelite, so you have a lot of upgrading to do throughout throughout playing. But if you haven't played this game and you want like a solid action experience, Curse of the Dead God. I'm honestly quite surprised it didn't get as much recognition as I thought it would, because it feels amazing. It's a great game. This is going to be a solid A tier above Brotato. This is great. Next up, we've got Darkest Dungeon. Boy, oh boy, Darkest Dungeon. This is a turn-based dungeon crawler, I guess. People know this game. You probably heard of this one before, because it has a reputation of being absolutely devastating. That's right. This game is people kind of compared it to like the Dark Souls of roguelikes, but not in the actual design or gameplay, but more in just like, it can be really, really, really challenging, and it can feel absolutely terrible. You go into dungeons with a team of people. Once you've cleared the dungeon, you go back to the village, and in the village you can get more people, and you can have different upgrades, and la-di-da. The thing is, when your character dies, it's dead forever on your file. And you can spend like 10 plus hours building one character. For example, if you have like a lower level team, but you have one really powerful guy, you're gonna have him in a team to try to help the others get leveled up. So you're gonna do that. But the thing is, there's a lot of RNG in this game. And sometimes, even if you feel really powerful, you can get easily critted by like a boss and like lose all your hit points, or someone randomly gets sick. And once your guys are dead, it's done. You have to now start over building a new character from scratch, and my goodness. This is a really interesting one because I've come back to this game a lot, and I think a lot of people have. Basically, the usual cycle is you play this game, you're like, oh, this is fun. I like the turn-based aspect of it. And you play for like 10 hours, and then your favorite character dies, and you're like, well, I'm done. I don't want to build again. And you leave the game for like a year, and then you come back to it. It's like, you know what? Let's play Darkest Dungeon again. And the cycle repeats. You play for a few hours. You got a few characters you start loving. You bring them into a mission. They randomly just get destroyed by some random thing, and then you feel terrible, and you don't want to continue. It's an interesting cycle. Some people love it. I think it's fine. I think there's a lot of balance issues, but the thing is, the balance issues are part of the gameplay to some extent. It's supposed to feel terrible, but even the items you find through your adventure early on, you can find like a helmet, for example, that has a downside that's as big as the upside. Sometimes they feel completely useless, so it's hard to really build a character outside of getting levels and currency. I do come back to this game every now and then. I heard the second one that just came out is pretty different, and it wasn't received super well, but I am curious about it. I might try it. This one, I do come back to it. Some people really love it. I think it's a little too brutal for me, but I'm going to put it as like a B tier, like a mid B tier, like a high B tier. Next up, we've got Dead Cells. Dead Cells is a 2D action roguelike where you go really fast and slash a lot of things very quickly. So this game is pretty popular, I would say, and for good reasons. You always play the same character, but you can find a lot of different weapons and a lot of different equipment. And each run definitely feels pretty unique, even though you don't have really a lot of unique passives. This really does rely on the weapons you find. And luckily for the game, each weapon feels very different from one another, and has like unique animations. Each one of them feel like they've really been designed super well, which is great. The balance is amazing as well. You can really play with almost every weapon with great success. This game feels amazing. I mean, there's an entire video on YouTube from the developers that explain how they designed the game so that Dead Cells would feel good. And they did a good job. They really did. You are super fast. You feel super powerful every time. You're just killing things left and right. It is marketed as a Metroidvania roguelite. I disagree. I think it's just for the marketing reasons, and people like to say that it is a Metroidvania. It's not. You spend like 3 to 4 hours unlocking the abilities to traverse the world, but after you've got these abilities, it's literally just like any roguelite. Also, this is a game that has so many updates. They constantly release new DLC, new updates. To this day, I go on my Steam and I say, oh, another Dead Cell expansion. Awesome. I do come back to it, and I love seeing the new stuff. There's a ton of bosses, a ton of biomes, a ton of different weapons. Yeah, this game is insane. If you haven't played it, in terms of like action roguelikes, it's one of the best. It's an easy S tier. You've got to play it. Next up, we've got Dead Cells Dead Estate. It almost feels like a Flash game, and it's supposed to feel like a Flash game. I believe this is based on the old Newgrounds animations and like art style. This game does not take itself very seriously, which is fine. It's kind of the vibe of the game. It's just kind of fun and goofy. That being said, there's a ton of secrets, which is kind of fun. It's one of those games where you just play randomly. I feel like there's not much, but you just constantly discover new things. But in terms of the gameplay itself, I struggle a little bit with it. I think that it's super minimalistic. There's also, as you can see, this is there's a third-person 3D aspect, but you can jump. And that is really awkward. Even though I've played it quite a bit, maybe like 10 plus hours, I still always feel awkward jumping in this 3D environment. There's a lot of different weapons, but the weapons kind of feel random, like you can only hold 1 or 2 weapons at a time. It's fine, it's cute, it's fun. I do come back to it every now and then. Not a huge fan of the pixel art on this one. I like the art style outside of the pixel art. But yeah, it doesn't take itself very seriously, and I kind of respect that. It's a fun, goofy game that I like. Again, for me, like I said, a lot of these games are not bad. So even though it's in C tier, it's just not a game I'm likely to play again. It's cute. I think they did exactly what they wanted to do. Next up, we've got Deck of Ashes, another deck building game. This one, the unique gimmick is not much, to be honest. There's not much. There's nothing too unique about this game, in my opinion. The gameplay itself is pretty basic. You're a single person. You're playing a single character. You have your traditional cards. And outside of the gameplay, the world itself is kind of like a click and point. You just go to one particular area, it has an event or a fight, and that's about it. Nothing too unique. I think one of the unique gimmicks is that when you play a card, you didn't have to restore it outside of battle, which can be pretty annoying, to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of the game in general. I don't like the art style. I think they take it themselves way too seriously. Even though I don't think it works with the art style, because I think the art style is a little goofy at times, but they take it themselves really seriously. And not a huge fan of the gameplay itself, nothing too unique. I've seen this many times in these kind of games. I wasn't a huge fan. I don't think there's much to say about it. I tried it, some people liked it, good for them, but I thought it was a little boring. So I'm gonna put this as indeed. Next up, we've got Don't Starve. This is a really, really well-known roguelike. This is a survival kind of adventure. Well, it's just more a survival game, roguelike. I'm going to be honest from the get-go. This is probably the one game on this list that I really have not played much. Like I've played barely of it. I wish I could have played more because I know there's a lot about this game. I know this is definitely an amazing game for a lot of people. I just don't know much about it. I probably shouldn't have had it on this list, to be honest. But from what I've played, The few times I've played it, it's really fun. It's very challenging. This is also known to be a very challenging game, of course. You're constantly just trying to survive. What else to say? The game is called Don't Starve. Try to survive as best you can. The world is grand. There's a lot of things in the world. Everything's trying to kill you. You're trying to build you're slowly building a little camp for yourself to try to survive. Different weapons, different things, just to try to survive. The gameplay itself, the fighting, is not really interesting, and it's not supposed to be super interesting. It doesn't. That's not the point of it. It's kind of like a Stardew Valley on fire. Not really, but I wish I could say more. I wish I could have played more of it, because I realized when I started playing it that you need to play this game a lot to really get a full grasp of what this game is. I know some people love it, and good for you guys. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to put it as a B tier because I played it a little bit. It took me... I didn't get grasped by it immediately. I definitely could. I'm pretty sure I could. I'm sure this could be a higher tier. Right now, I'm going to leave it as a mid B. I'm just going to leave it in the middle of this tier list, because I don't have enough to say about it, and from what I played, it was fine. Okay, next up, we've got an interesting game. This is Downwell. If you don't know Downwell, this is a very minimalistic roguelike. I mean, this is like, doesn't get more roguelike than this. It's just, you start the game, and that's it. Once you're done with your run, you start back from zero. The unique gimmick of this game is that a lot of games, when you think about it, you try to advance up or forward, but never down. You're trying to go down as fast as possible, and you only have three buttons, left, right, and jump. And when you jump, if you press jump again, you can shoot your weapon under you. You can find different weapons, different upgrades throughout your runs. But yeah, this is a very minimalistic game, and it's actually really amazingly well designed. This definitely feels like it might have been a game jam. If you don't know what that is, that's when people just randomly meet up to try to make a game very quickly. And this definitely feels like someone who just had like a quick idea and actually made a really fun game out of it. This is definitely more of a skill-based game. It's not like you're never gonna feel overpowered. It's all about how comfortable are you with the actual mechanics of the game themselves. So it's fun at first, but it does obviously get very repetitive since there's no real unique builds that you'll be finding. It's just a matter of how far down can you go. Very punishing. You easily take damage and you don't have much health. And the well is pretty deep. I finished this game once, and after I was done finishing it, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm glad I finished it, but I'm done. Not planning on coming back to this game. It's super cheap, but I'm not gonna put that into account. I mean, you could get this for like a few bucks, and you could probably find this on. Probably a great app game to have, but that's not what this list is about. This is purely what my entertainment of playing these games. I'm gonna put it as a high D tier. Next up, we've got Dungeon Souls, I believe is what it's called. It doesn't get more basic than this. This is your classic top-down dungeon crawler. That's it. It's a small game that got a tiny bit of recognition at one point. There's nothing unique about it, but it is very chaotic. It's pretty unbalanced, which is part of the fun. You'll very quickly be completely overpowered if you're able to survive long enough. There's different characters. There's a few secrets here and there. There's a ton of bugs, which is really fun. I honestly kind of have like a soft spot for this game. I like coming back to it every now and then. I actually played this one multiplayer with a friend a long time ago. It's a good time if you want to just not be thinking much and just have a quick fun time. Maybe you could play it, but in all, it's just it's not a great game. It's just kind of enjoyable. It's like a guilty pleasure of mine. As a guilty pleasure, I'll put it as a low B tier because it is pretty fun. Next up, we've got Dungeonmans, I think is the name of this game. This is a turn-based top-down roguelike where you explore different areas, you get different abilities. I didn't play this game too much. I'm gonna be honest. I tried it at first, and it was a little overwhelming. Even though I've played a lot of these games before, this one, maybe it was a time when I first started playing it, I didn't fully get into it. The animation, obviously, you can see is very minimalistic. It's a bit of an older game, but even though I was struggling a little bit with the overall look of the game. I do like old games, but this one, it really did feel like things were just juxtaposed. Is that how you say it? Like we're just above the map area. You get a ton of different loot. You get a ton of different things to manage. There's a lot to keep track of. I could see myself coming back to try it again. I don't have too much to say about it. There's other games of this genre that I had more fun with. So personally, yeah, I'll put this as a low C. Didn't really enjoy it. Okay, next up, we've got Dungreed. Now Dungreed is pretty straightforward 2D action dungeon crawler action. I already said that. Roguelike. Where you explore a dungeon, you fight enemies, you find weapons, you find items, and it's a traditional roguelike. That being said, this one is a freaking masterpiece. This is a really interesting case because people that know about this game will all say that this is a hidden gem, but not many people know about it. I think it's also a Japanese game, or maybe it's a Chinese game, I forgot. But this game is so good. What the hell? It has no right being this good. I remember seeing this on Steam, and it had such good reviews, and it looked just so basic. And then when I started playing it, I was like, my goodness, there's so much to do in this game. What it comes down to it is that, first of all, the controls feel really, really smooth. A lot of these 2D action roguelikes sometimes I personally think struggle with just the movement and the actual fighting aspect can feel a little clunky. This one feels great. You have a lot of control over your character. You have great dashes and every weapon is very different. There's a ton of weapons. There's a ton of unique synergies. There's also a cool unique design where you can eat different foods through your run, and each food can give you different stats so you can really try to focalize on one particular stat while having also different items, different passives. Everything that a roguelike should be, this does really well. The bosses are phenomenal. The music, oh my goodness, the music is great. It's hilariously great. Different characters, a lot of customization, a lot of different items, synergies, phenomenal. If you don't know this game, go play it. Another crazy thing that happened with this game is this game came out years ago, and that was it. It came out and that was it. And then like years later, out of the bloom, they just decided to just release this huge update for free, for no reason. Like, it's not like this game came back, but they just realized, oh, you know what? For our fans that really did like our game, we're gonna make a huge update. What? So now there's a new hidden boss, new location, new weapons, new everything. And that just got released recently, which is insane. They also made a hard mode with unique enemies. Gosh, this game is great. So I would highly recommend playing Dungreed. I'm going to put this as a high A tier. It's almost an S tier, but S tier is really for the best of the best. It's almost there. The food mechanic was great. The food mechanics made it so that like all the basic number adjustments of your character, like attack speed and stuff like that, were around the food, and all the items were all very gameplay mechanically changing things throughout your run. It was great to have both. Okay, next up, we've got the one and only Enter the Gungeon. Enter the Gungeon is a classic top-down action shooter. This is probably one of the most famous ones. This game is getting a little old now in terms of roguelike history. I've played this game a lot. This is one of the games I've played the most on all these games out there. I got really comfortable with it. I've unlocked everything. I've 100%ed it. I really, really, really love this game. Now, funny enough, I've realized that I was playing it while I was getting a lot of updates and all the new releases and stuff. So when that was occurring, it was really cool to see new stuff occurring like every few months. Like, oh my goodness, a new boss now. There's new items. There's new stuff to do. I was so excited every time there was something new. I really, really wish they kept that going. Unfortunately, they had to move on to other stuff, which we'll talk about very soon. But now it's kind of interesting because now I've come back to this game after playing so many roguelikes in my life that I've realized that in this day and age, this game it's still amazing. But definitely feel like it could have more. I always feel like I want more out of this game. I feel this game could have even more stuff going on. But in all fairness, this obviously is a masterpiece in a lot of different aspects of roguelike. The vibe is super funny. Everything is a reference in this game. The animations, the characters, the art is great. Really cute, really funny. Ton of items, ton of guns, all with really quirky things each. It's always fun to discover new guns. You're like, what the hell is that? If you're really comfortable with this game, you will be able to beat this game pretty easily and consistently. I think it's great to have a combination of roguelike elements that can really make you overpowered, but also if you're really comfortable with the mechanics, you will be rewarded and you will be able to be really comfortable in the game. So I really love that aspect. This is an obvious S tier, no doubt about it. But I think these days I'm more likely to play Dead Cells because it feels a little bit more modern than Gungeon. To be honest, it's also because I've just played the hell out of Gungeon, so I'm almost getting tired of it. But I can't deny that it's a masterpiece, and if you haven't played it, you have to play it. It's part of, I mean, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, these games really did help bring back the roguelikes to this day and age of gaming. Okay, next up, we've got an interesting one. This is Exit the Gungeon. So, you know, you've done your whole shenanigans in the Gungeon, and now it's time to get out. So this game is interesting, because this was the reason that they stopped updating Enter the Gungeon. Not the reason, I guess. I mean, they were tired of with Enter the Gungeon, and they wanted to move on to new stuff. They did Exit the Gungeon. And a lot of people got a little disappointed from the bat because, well, first of all, they originally said it was going to be like a sequel to Enter the Gungeon, but it's way more minimalistic because this is supposed to be more on the... it was originally like designed to be on apps. So obviously, it's going to be a little more minimalistic. People were not super happy about that concept from the get-go. What about the game? This is a 2D... so this is a 2D, but it's not top-down. So immediately you can kind of see that you're way more limited space-wise compared to Enter the Gungeon. It's once again a bullet hell, but you have way less space to work with. And that can be a little awkward. Runs are much faster. And also the RNG aspects, the random factors, are weird. In this game, you don't collect guns just like in Enter the Gungeon. You randomly switch guns after a few seconds of using it all the time. It feels really minimalistic in that regard. They're trying to just... Well, I guess it is all RNG in that case, but it's just weird. I don't really like the design they went with it. Of course, I love the art style. It's straight up Gungeon, and I was like, oh, hell, I remember all these things from Gungeon. But the gameplay itself is just not really fun. I really tried to stick to it because I love Enter the Gungeon, and I really wanted to like this game, but ultimately, I was a little disappointed, and I'm not gonna be disappointed because it took like, because people say that it took like away from Enter the Gungeon. I don't think so. I just think from just the game itself, it's kind of boring. Also, I beat it on my first run the first time because I think I got lucky, and also, you know, once you get really powerful guns, you kind of snowball because the more powerful guns you randomly get, the more likely you're going to get better guns. It's a weird system. But not a huge fan. But that being said, of course, I can't put this super low because look at the art style. I mean, yes, it is Enter the Gungeon, but still, it looks awesome. They didn't just revamp, they didn't just take exactly the same sprites and put it in there. They've remodeled a lot of the characters from the other game, and I mean, it's great to just see all these characters alive again. So that by itself definitely helps. So I'm going to put it above Dungeonmans as a C tier. Next up, we've got FTL. Now, FTL, it's getting pretty old now. This is a real-time strategy game that a lot of people say really did help bring back roguelikes to life as well. A lot of people would say that this is an absolute masterpiece, and I can understand that. Now, when we're talking about Convoy, this is what Convoy wants to be. And I believe FTL does it much better. So in this game, you have control of a starship. Why did I say starship? Do you say starship or is it just like a spaceship? Yeah, spaceship. Thank you. You have control of a spaceship, and you're exploring the galaxies, and you're just trying to get to the end. Once you get to the end, you win, and that's about it. Then you can start a new run with a different ship. There's no roguelite element other than just unlocking new ships. So it's just once you do a run, that's your run, and you get to enjoy it. I think this game does a much better job with this design than Convoy. First of all, the gameplay itself, the action portions, there's a lot of strategy from the start. You have a crew to manage. You have to shoot different parts of the enemy ships. You can upgrade different parts of your ship to each part of the ship is completely different and brings in unique aspects to the battle sections. So yeah, the action is always fun from the start, which I really respect. The exploration is, I think, much more interesting. Even though this is not like you're not physically moving your ship, you're just clicking from one point to another. You would say, hey, well, that doesn't feel as engaging as Convoy. I actually think it's better because in Convoy you're just kind of randomly just moving you're just kind of randomly moving in an empty space. While here you're just once you're done with an event, boom, you go to the next one by clicking on a random spot. You get a random event. You read the event, you either fight or you deal with certain scenarios. It's super fast paced, and there's also, you can pause the game whenever you want, you can repair your ship whenever you want. It's up to you how fast you want to go, and I really love that. I actually just played FTL yesterday because this was one of the games that I felt like I had to replay before this tier list. And it's true that my opinion did go up. Originally I was like, yeah, it's fun. But now I kind of want to continue playing this game because it is really, really well designed. And each run will feel pretty unique. You'll have different weapons, different crews. You'll encounter different events. It's great, honestly. A great strategy game. So I'm going to put this as a low A tier. I love it. Easy S for you? No, I totally get it. I totally respect people that say that there's an S tier. I didn't get to play it early, and I think there's a lot of love for if you got lucky playing this really early on. I didn't play this game too early, and I think now, having played so many other roguelikes, a lot of games took inspiration from FTL, which I respect, and I totally understand it being an S tier. I'm just more likely these days to play Arcanium, Brotato, Dead Cells, all these games than FTL. But yeah, you know what? Just I don't want it to be at the bottom of A tier. It feels wrong. This could easily be an S for many people, and I respect it. Next up, we've got Fury Unleashed. This is a cool game where you have where you're a cool guy with big guns and you shoot. I think you shoot like Nazis and like aliens and monsters. It's pretty ridiculous. But here's a really, really interesting thing about this game. This actually has a phenomenal story and a really heartwarming story. You'd be like, what? Well, actually, what you're seeing is all part of a comic book. This is just some guy who's writing this comic book and who's getting tired of writing these action comic books. And you actually get to see his entire story as a writer. And things get pretty emotional. You can see like all the emails the guy's getting, and he's getting tired of doing these comics. Fury's getting a little old. It's really interesting. So I really got to love the story elements, the plot elements of it. The gameplay itself, yeah, it's what you see is what you get. You know, it's super flashy, big explosions, big guns. In terms of individual runs, things get very repetitive in my opinion. You get a lot of different guns, but they all kind of feel fairly similar from one another, and you don't really find unique abilities throughout your runs. So things don't really feel very different from one run to another, which is kind of annoying. That being said, the bosses are awesome. I love the bosses. Music is great. The art is great, and the plot is amazing. But I finished it once, and I think it was honestly more of a campaign-like experience. Like once you finished it, you're like, yeah, that was fun. but you're probably not going to come back to it. So I would say, you know, after like 10 hours or so of it, I had a good time, and I could recommend this game. I mean, this is fun, really. So I'm going to put this like right about here. No, yeah, right about here, like a mid-low B tier. Best story to gameplay ratio. Yeah, no, the story was so good. Like seriously, like you just don't expect it, and you get to see all these emails the guys getting, and it gets pretty emotional. It gets really real. Like it feels very realistic. It almost feels like it was pretty personal to the actual designer of the game. Okay, next up we've got Going Under. Going Under is a action dungeon crawler, again, like a lot of these games. This also has a huge focus on the story. From the start, you're gonna be encountering a lot of cool NPCs and characters, and it's all about your relationship with everybody. You're pretty much an intern in this big corporation. In this big business, you're this intern, and the cool gimmick of this game is that you can pretty much grab anything in any room and use it as a weapon. So you don't actually need a weapon. You can use a table, you can use a computer, you can use a keyboard, you can use whatever you want. The art style is amazing, the music is great. I gotta say that first of all, because seriously, I really fell in love with this game in that regard, and I was really interested in the story element. This definitely is, once again, a campaign kind of roguelite. Once you finished it, I don't think there's much reason to come back to it. There is a full-on roguelite like mode where that's outside of the actual story, but once you finish the story, you're pretty happy with it. This game has quite a few bugs. For those of you who were there for when I showcased it on stream, I went out of bounds accidentally and bugged out a lot of things. It's a little buggy, not to the point where it's not enjoyable, but it is something to keep in mind. It was really funny. It's very goofy. It's really funny. It has great humor. And yeah, I think there's a cool. The end game is really fun. The final boss is really unique and cool. So I had a blast playing it. But again, I'm not gonna be coming back to it because it's a single adventure thing. That being said, would definitely recommend. I'm gonna put this as like a high B tier. You know what? Like a high B tier. This is really fun, honestly. This is a good game. All right, next up, we've got our first-person roguelike. Oh man, this game, Gunfire Reborn. So this is, again, first-person shooter. Roguelike, you have different characters, different weapons to pick. You have different passives, a ton of different abilities. This game is packed. There's a lot to do in this game, and it's constantly getting new updates. This game is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I will say I've been playing this multiplayer as well with a lot of friends, and it is an amazing multiplayer experience. That being said, I'm not reviewing it as a multiplayer game. Personally, I've played it a ton as a single player. I will say the runs are huge. I think a single run, if you're going for like the final boss, can take up to an hour and a half. And if you die, it's over, you restart. So you really have to commit to it. But there's a ton of unique builds, a ton of different ways to play the game, a bunch of bosses, bunch of enemies, but a ton of passives. Like, my goodness, the passive system is huge in this game. You're going to be finding passives like 2 to 3 times per floor, and each floor can be less than 5 minutes. So you're always gonna like feel powerful, which is awesome in these kind of games. There's a lot of different game modes. This game is great. My goodness, like seriously, I was really surprised by how packed this game was and how much love it's getting. It's still getting updated, new characters. I think there was a recent update that I cannot wait to play. I love this game so much that I'm gonna put this as high A tier. I was thinking of putting an S, but then I'm looking at the other games. I'm like, so close, but definitely high A tier. This game is amazing. Definitely play it if you like first-person shooters. Off-stream version, yes. Something to mention, for some reason, the versions that are not on Steam, which I think the Xbox and Microsoft, whatever, they are not being updated. So they're like really old versions of them, still to this day, which is really frustrating. I don't know why that's the case, but play the one on Steam if you can, because that's the correct version to play right now. Okay, next up, we've got a pretty interesting one. You might have heard of this game before. This is called Hades. This game released not too long ago and kind of blew everybody away, came out of nowhere. It's great. It's really great. This is the first and only game I've ever speedrun and got pretty good at. I remember when it first got released, I was in the top 100 of one of the particular runs. That definitely did not, that was not the case for very long, because my goodness, people love speedrunning this game, and for good reasons. Okay, so there's a ton of customization from the start of every run. There's a lot of different passives, a lot of different weapons. Each weapons have their own unique abilities. A lot of different charms you can start with, companions you can start with, different customization on the difficulty of each run. Whew, there's a lot to do in this game. This game never gets old. Seriously, you can continuously play this, and it never gets old. Not to mention, art style is amazing, visual effects are amazing, the characters are absolutely amazing. There's voice acting for every single voice line in this game, like for every single like text in this game. There's voice line, and there's so much text. There's just so much going on for this game. I love it. It never gets old. I can always come back to it. It's a masterpiece. Let's be real. It deserves all the hype. I wish I could put so far like games on S tier that are not obviously S tiers, but no, this game definitely deserves to be S tier. It's an absolute masterpiece. This is honestly probably the best roguelike so far. Next up, we've got Hand of Fate. This is another deck building roguelike, and this is also another one of those games that's trying to combine two very different styles: the deck building aspect and the 3D action fighting aspect. And unfortunately, like I said before, a lot of these games fall pretty short. And this, unfortunately, is the case. The card aspect is just you and someone else on a table, and he's the one explaining what's going on verbally, so you don't really get to see much, which I guess a lot of deck building games don't do either. It's super slow. When you're in the actual like card section of the game, it's very slow pace. It's cool. I love the narrator. It's really cool to see the narrator like talk about everything with this really cool voice and explain everything that's going on. But once you get to the action portions, it's a really traditional just 3D action game. It almost feels like someone grabbed some 3D assets from like a Unity store and just made a cool functioning action game. I respect what they were going for, but it's so drastically different from one another. I can understand some people liking it, but I thought it was kind of like meh. The fighting was pretty underwhelming, so I wasn't personally a huge fan of it. But I like the idea, so I'll put this as like a mid C. Next up, we've got Hand of Fate 2. Now, why am I talking about Hand of Fate 2 after what I just said about Hand of Fate? Well, because I like deck building games, and when I saw that Hand of Fate 2 was out and that it got really good reviews, I was kind of curious to see, hey, maybe they actually managed to like build from that they actually made things better. I'm surprised they just kept the same kind of vibe. They really didn't change much. They just tried to improve on everything that Hand of Fate 1 did. Did they improve? Yeah, they did. The game is much more fun. The visuals are much more polished. Both design aspects are much better. The deck building portion is a lot more extensive. There's cooler events and stuff. Still super slow, but that's kind of the design they went for. And the action is a lot more fun. This actually almost feels like a proper action game. Still not my favorite game out there, though. It doesn't matter how perfect these two genres could be. It's still kind of clashing for me. Like, when I play a deck building game, I kind of want to sit down and just focus on strategy and stuff. And when I play an action game, I kind of want things to go fast. So it's it definitely is fighting with its own style. but it's much better. This one I actually did enjoy playing it, but I'm still gonna put it as a low B tier. I might come back to it every now and then, but I would probably not recommend it as a deck building game for people. Next up, we've got Have a Nice Death. If you haven't seen this game, then you're in for a treat, because my goodness, the visuals are awesome. This game looks amazing. I'm just gonna say it from the start. It's been in the works for a very long time. I started playing it in early access, and I think it's fully out now. Yeah, it is fully out. And once you see the gameplay in just a second, there you go. You can see the animations are great. It looks very flashy. Things move super quickly. You have a lot of control over your character. You have a lot of different spells, different abilities. You always feel really cool playing this game. Now, between runs, I will say that this game does get a little repetitive in a way that once you find like 1 or 2 good spells, you're gonna stick to it. And once you stick to it, that's all you'll be using for the rest of the run. That's really like my main criticism with this game, is that even though it looks amazing, it's super cool, each run you'll have different abilities, but the entire run, you're kind of just gonna stick with it and you're just gonna upgrade these specific abilities during that run. So that kind of gets old for me, especially since the runs can get pretty long. But again, look how amazing this game looks. I mean, the art, the animation, the characters, it's just so cute and fun. I cannot not recommend this, and I do come back to it. Also, they've done a lot of updates, and I really respect the fact that they put a lot of care into trying to keep this game alive, so that's awesome. And for that, I'm going to give this a probably like a low A tier. I'm more likely to play Hands of Fate than Arcanium, so yeah. Good game. This is the kind of game that the first time you play it, it's gonna feel so amazing. Once you've played it many times and you've seen all the spells and all the abilities, which there's a lot of them, to be honest, then it kind of gets repetitive. Because you can't really create unique builds within runs. You just find specific abilities and that's what you're gonna be sticking to. You're not gonna find unique combos within runs. Okay, next up, we've got Heroes of Hammerwrath. This is a top-down, pretty chill action dungeon crawler-ish vibe game. I haven't played this game too much. I tried it like 2 or 3 times, and because when I looked at the trailers, I was like, man, there's so much. This looks so cool. But getting to these bosses takes a long time, because this is definitely a roguelite that you need to build. You kind of need to grind quite a bit to get started. And the early game is pretty boring and very repetitive. You're always going to be starting in the same dungeon and you're always going to be fighting the same critters. And unfortunately, the gameplay itself is not super engaging, especially at the early game. So it's a shame because I kind of want to see all this cool stuff that I'm seeing on the trailers, but I tried to stick to it and I kind of get bored. It's not that it wasn't too hard. It was just a little too slow for me. It's cute though, and I could see myself coming back to it one day. Like, because I want to experience all the cool stuff that I've been seeing. It's just that early game is slow. It's not very unique of a game. It just kind of looks cool. And so maybe one day I'll come back to it. But for now, it's going to be like a low B tier. Next up, we've got Inscryption. This is from the creator of Pony Island. Fun fact, a lot of people don't know what Pony Island was. I played Pony Island when it first came out years ago. It was a Flash game, I think. It was a really weird and spooky game. If you don't know Inscryption, you should. This is a deck building roguelike, and quotes on both parts of it. This is definitely the biggest story campaign game on this list. You kind of just want to experience it once. But if you haven't experienced it, go do that. This is a really unique, it has a lot of unique combinations of stuff going on. And this is one roguelite that does its combinations really well. I don't want to spoil, this is probably the only game on this list that I really can't spoil. And for those of you who have played this game, you would understand why. But the story elements are absolutely amazing. The gameplay is really unique. I guess all things considered, the gameplay is probably the weakest part of this game. That doesn't mean much when you're talking about a masterpiece. It's just that it's very easy to break, and it's not very well balanced. It's not really supposed to be balanced because there's just so much else going on in this game. There's a lot of puzzle elements and a lot of exploration to do, and you discover a lot of stuff about what's going on within the game and your character, and you uncover crazy secrets and crazy plot twists, and you've got to experience this game. It's really different, and you don't need to be this is one of the few like deck building games where you don't need to be like a deck building kind of guy to play this game. You just need to experience the crazy adventure that Inscryption will offer. Just play it. It's absolutely amazing. I'm gonna put this one as an easy S tier. I'm gonna put it. Oh man, the S tier is so hard to figure out. Is it better than Enter the Gungeon? It's so different because Enter the Gungeon I've played 300 hours of. Inscryption I've maybe played like 25. But you're not supposed to play more than 25. So I would say Inscryption blew my mind more. Maybe. They're very close. A lot of the S tiers are kind of like on the same level. Next up, we got another deck building game. This is Loop Hero. Now, this doesn't really look like a deck building game. This is the deck building part. Instead of having like a deck of cards that you can hand in your hand, your cards are just different parts of nature, like mountains and like lakes and roads that you put in this huge world, and each one of them will create different things and scenarios in this loop that your character is just doing automatically, constantly. Battles are automated. This is an automated battle system, so it's more just kind of more of a strategy game where you're just placing tiles and just seeing how things work. This game got a lot of praise and did pretty well. It's really unique. Definitely not for everybody. It has a really unique style, which is really cool. Visually, it's hit or miss, I would say. Some people think it's cool. I think it gets pretty tiring after a while. I respect it. Again, it kind of goes for that old-fashioned style, but after a while, I kind of get tired of it. There's a lot of different characters you can play. I think you fight a lot of different bosses. I haven't played this in a while, but when I played it, I thought it was pretty good. I played it for solid 10-15 hours, I would say. I could see myself come back to it, and I could recommend that to some people that want a unique experience. It's definitely interesting, and it might be worth a try if you want something a little different. So yeah, I'm gonna put this as definitely like a mid-high B tier. Yeah, I'll put that here. Again, don't starve. Sorry, I haven't played it enough. It's the only game in there that I haven't played enough. Okay, next up, we've got Loot River. Now, Loot River has a really unique gimmick. This is a top-down action roguelike, but the unique gimmick is that you're always going to be surrounded by these little platforms on water that you can actually control yourself. So you're controlling your character and the platforms that you're walking on, which is a really cool concept, and I love the gimmick. Unfortunately, I think the game is quite underwhelming. I love the art style, and I think there's definitely a great vibe in terms of like the adventure side of things is really great. Once you find these unique events and these unique bosses, you're like, wow, that's really great. But the battles themselves, the action portion gets really repetitive and really boring. There's also a ton of roguelite elements that you need to get over. My goodness, you need to grind a ton in order to get to the fun parts. Like, this is one of the grindiest games I've played in a while. You can't unlock a single piece of clothing until you've completed like 4 runs. And once you've done that, the piece of clothing does barely anything. It gets really annoying very quickly. It definitely has a lot of skill. Definitely like a skill-heavy game. Getting used to controlling your character and the platform you're on is pretty confusing and hard at first. And I really like that. But unfortunately, you're going to be going through that first floor a ton, and that first floor only has a few enemies that are always the same, and you're always going to be finding the same few spells out there. There's not that many unique spells, or you have to unlock them, and it takes forever to do that. So for the first like easy 5 hours of gameplay, you're always going to be having the same build on the same map, because the game is hard. So you're always just going to be, it just takes so long to get into. Also, some of the bosses feel very unbalanced. There's easy ways to cheese them, and they can also just kind of one-shot you out of nowhere. It's a little unbalanced. I think this game could have been really, really interesting if there was more time put into and a little different design approaches. I love what they were going for, and I've played it for a bit, and I will admit I had a blast seeing the different bosses and the different biomes, but that took me a while to get to. And I got really comfortable with the game too. But it's a little underwhelming. I'm gonna put it as a high C tier. It looks more like a puzzle game. It honestly can feel like a puzzle game, especially at the beginning where you're just trying to get used to the controls. It can be a lot. It really does. Okay, next up, we've got Be A Landlord. Now, if you want to talk about a unique game, this is a unique game. This is a gambling roguelite. You're like, what? A roguelike, by the way, sorry. You don't have money. Your landlord needs money, and so you need to gamble to get money to pay your landlord. Okay, it sounds pretty ridiculous. That's what the game is. So the way it works is that every spin you can add more possible tokens to your gambling machine. Each token will have really unique abilities that mostly will all just kind of synergize with each other. All of them need to have other specific tokens in order to work. So you have a lot of different builds to go for. You can have like a seed build where if you find a rain token and then the scene is next to your rain, something happens. Or if you can have like an animal build where if you find like a farmer and then like your farmer is next to your animals, when you spin, then something happens. There's a lot of luck, obviously, but there's also a lot of strategy in terms of what you're going to be putting into your gambling machine. Not to mention, you can also see that there's a lot of unique passives you can find throughout the run. So it's not just the gambling, but the passives can be like, oh, if you have empty spots when you do a spin, get money. If you have 3 kittens in one spin, then get something. I'm probably not saying the right tokens. It's been a while, but it's really fun. It's like surprisingly entertaining. For something that's so minimalistic, you really get a blast playing this, and it's an easy game to come back to because again, it's a roguelike. So you just come and go. You know, like you just want to go for a few spins, go for it. Each run maybe lasts 20 plus minutes, maybe less, maybe more. I kind of forgot, but it's nothing too crazy commitment. And you always find new and fun builds. Also, this is a game that you can easily break. You can find some particular builds. If you get really lucky and you get the right combination of stuff, you can then get crazy amount of monies, which is always fun in a game to possibly just break the game every now and then. You don't want your game to be completely unbalanced, but when you have the possibility to have insanely powerful builds every now and then, it's always fun. Let's be real. This is one of them. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely a really fun game. I don't know if I'm going to be playing this non-stop. I could see a lot of people putting this pretty high. I'm going to put it as a very high B tier, probably under Boneraiser Minion, but honestly, it's really fun. Maybe under Darkest Dungeon. Magicide. Okay, this is an oldie right here. It's a survival exploration roguelike where you create a character and you're just thrown into the world and you just explore and get stronger, get new weapons, new stuff in order to progress and save the world. I think I played it recently, and I was really excited to try this game because I've played the other game that they released a few years later, which we'll get to, and this is one of those games, one of these old games where there's a ton of secrets and a ton of builds and a ton of things that you're just not going to know unless you look it up. It definitely feels great to like get thrown into it and just discover things for yourself. But ultimately, if you don't look up things, you're going to be kind of left stranded for a while, and you're also going to die randomly, and you're going to lose your character, and then you have to restart from scratch, which can feel pretty rough. But it's part of the game. You know, it's kind of like it is a hardcore experience, like a lot of these hardcore games out there. I respect it. Like a lot of these games, it definitely helped a lot of roguelikes today, because this is definitely from the early 2000s, or maybe like, again, mid 2000s. Again, like roguelikes are honestly fairly new, all things considered, in the span of time. I played it a little bit. I got tired of it. It's slow. It's grindy. It's fun to discover new things, but ultimately, in this day and age, thank you for having inspired a lot of rogue designers out there these days. I'll more likely to play it than to exit in Gungeon, but about it. Next up, we've got Monster Train. Monster Train is another deck building roguelike. What's the unique gimmick about this one? Well, you are on a train, and the train has 3 levels, and each level is its own board to an extent of characters. So you have to kind of manage 3 different games at the same time. Does that sound overwhelming? Yeah, it's a little overwhelming for people that are not used to playing deck building games. That's for sure. This is not, you can see like this is one layer, this is another layer. You can place different minions on different levels of the train. The gameplay is absolutely amazing. In terms of customization and having unique builds, this might be one of the biggest roster of possible builds you can find out there. Gosh, there is so many different decks and builds you can do. Not to mention, when you start the game, you can choose from one faction, from like one of like 6 faction. Each faction will have their own champion, which are completely different play styles. Each faction can have 2 champions, and then when you choose a faction, you can then choose a secondary faction, which also changes your run completely. So from the start of every run, it's gonna feel very, very different. And each of these super unique starts will always be encountering unique new builds. I've played this game so much because it never gets old. It's very challenging, and it's definitely not for people that don't know much about deck building games out there. I love the animations, the art style. Oh, actually, the animation is pretty basic, sorry. The art style is phenomenal. The music is so great. Wow, it is such a good sounding game. If you haven't listened to the soundtrack, they're awesome. This is definitely one of my favorite deck building games out there. And I'm gonna put this as a high A tier, potentially even an S tier. I haven't played it in a little bit, but I always want to come back to it because Monster Train is mwah. If you like deck building games and you're ready for a challenge, go play it. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about Moonlighter. Moonlighter is a really cute game. It got a bit of traction when it came out, and I think it makes sense when you look at it. It's super cute. The art style is adorable. The music is great. There's a nice sense of adventure. You're playing this shopkeeper that is tired of being a shopkeeper, I believe, and so you go explore the world to try to find equipment that you can sell off and then get better equipment so you can get into better dungeons. It's actually, I'm willing to bet Cult of the Lamb got a lot of inspiration out of this game because this is also split in 2 different game styles. You've got the gameplay, roguelike elements, and then you've got the shopkeeping elements. Differently from Cult of the Lamb, I would say Cult of the Lamb puts a lot more effort in the building aspect than the gameplay. Well, this game is a lot more in the dungeon crawling aspect than the shop kind of portion of it. To be honest, the shop portion could honestly not be in the game and it would just be fine. I mean, you would have to change the game, but it's really straightforward. When you're taking care of your shop, there's really not much to do. It's just kind of like automation. Once you've played it a few times, you know exactly. It's always the same thing. It gets very repetitive. It's cute. And this is one of those games that I kind of wish I could forget and start again from fresh because, once again, it's also one of those campaign-based games where once you've played it to its full, to the end game and you've finished the game, you're kind of done with it. There's no real point to playing it again. Also, there's this system of once you've played the first dungeon, you get these pretty mediocre items, but you get enough money to get strong enough to beat this dungeon, so then you go to the next dungeon. This next dungeon is going to have the same items as the first, but just a better value. And then you sell those, and once you sell enough, you get another weapon. Now you can beat the boss, and then you get to the next dungeon. It has the same kind of materials. You just sell them at a higher price, you get a better weapon. It's kind of rinse and repeat in that regard. The gameplay itself is pretty minimalistic. The action is not super amazing, and it's not like the roguelike elements are going to be super crazy runs are not going to be like super flashy from one another. I think the point is that you're supposed to feel like you're not an overpowered random adventurer because you're a shopkeeper, and I like it. I think it has a great vibe. The game is super cute, and I really do respect it in that regard. But in terms of my enjoyment for it, I did enjoy finishing it, and I could recommend it to some people. But I think what really kept me going was the charm and the visuals of the game. I really wanted to see how the game would end, and that really helped push it. So this is going to be like a mid-high B tier, I would say. Probably better experience than going under. Be A Landlord, I think, is more fun. Next up, we've got Neon Abyss. This is a pretty straightforward 2D action dungeon crawler roguelike, where it's all just neon vibe, kind of like 80s vibe to it. It's visually really fun. Obviously, the music is great. That's no surprise. But the gameplay is not super unique. It's just another one of these games that I don't think there's a particularly unique concept to this game compared to other games. There are some pretty cool weapons out there. There's some pretty cool secret bosses. It's definitely a roguelite. You do have to grind a little bit, but not too hard. You can have a lot of different characters, but the characters don't really feel super different from one another, to be honest, compared to other games. Weapons in this game, I mean, the trailer really does make it look crazy, but a lot of weapons are not super fun, honestly. And some of the abilities, some of the passives are much more fun than others. But there's a lot to this game, and the visuals are great. I mean, of course, just looking at it, it definitely is the kind of game that if you just like dungeon crawlers, you're gonna like this game because it does everything pretty well. It's nothing super unique. I've seen a lot of these games out there, but it does it pretty well. The bosses are cool, the visuals are great, the music is great. Just nothing super unique. But this is like, for me, like the most basic, like solid B tier. I'd probably put it over Moonlighter slightly. Maybe not. I had a better experience with Moonlighter in general. But yeah, very basic game, fun. If you like these kind of games, go play it. You'll have a good time. We've got a spicy one coming up here. This is Noita. Now, if you don't know Noita, oh boy, what to say about Noita? So the unique gimmick of this game is that every particle is simulated. Now, what does that mean? It means this kind of stuff can happen. Fire spreads out in a very unique way. Water falls down in a realistic way. But again, you can't just make an entire game out of this concept. So this is a roguelike where you start at the top of a huge like mountain area, and you try to go as far down as possible. The thing is, this game is pretty unique. There's very few games out there that have that many secrets, that much to discover and to find. The community in this game, people that are committed to playing this game, are insane because the developers made sure to have like 100 secrets in this game that you're just never supposed to find out, or will take like years to understand. It's so extensive. There's just so much going on in this game. But outside of this, the gameplay is insanely punishing. This might be one of the hardest roguelikes ever. And people that have played this game will understand. The difficulty is definitely part of the design. It is supposed to be absolutely brutal because the way that the weapons work is that you create wands, and each wand you can put different spells in it. Each spell will will interact with each other in really unique and crazy ways. And so you might be like 30 minutes into a run, and you're gonna find this unique spell you're gonna put in your rod, and you're like, how does this work with this other spell? And you press the shoot button, and you explode, and you die, and that's it. Everybody has experienced this many times. It's part of the game. It's supposed to be brutal. But differently from Darkest Dungeon, I don't feel as bad when my character dies, because at least it's not like I've built an entire character and I stuck to my character. This, you know from the start that you should not hope that your character is going to survive for long, because anything can happen. There's a lot to talk about in this game. I could make an entire video talking about this game because there's so much to say. I've actually met the developers of this game at GDC years ago. I've played their early version of the game when it was just like a little area where they described what they were planning on doing with it. I remember being really excited about the concept, and I'm so happy that it's doing super well. I mean, all things considered, very well. People that love this game really love this game, and I understand why, because this game is great. It is one of the only A-tier games I'm going to put that I'm not going to recommend to many people, because this game is brutal. You need to commit playing to Noita. Anybody who plays Noita knows you need to commit to it. You either have 40 hours in Noita or 2,000 hours. I totally agree. No, wait. You either have 45 minutes, 40 hours, or 2,000 hours. I think those are the three. The 45 minutes are the ones that are like, playing it is like, oh, this is cool. Yep, I'm not gonna play this ever again. But you're absolutely right in that regard. Next up, we've got Nuclear Throne, I believe is the name of this game. And this, for a lot of people, is another game that definitely was a contributor to bringing back roguelikes in this day and age. This is one of the older action, like bullet hell experiences. I played it when it first came out years ago, and I remember absolutely loving it, and to no surprise, because yeah, it was really pretty unique for during this era, and to this day it is still really enjoyable. This is one of those games that is super chaotic. Things will explode left and right. It's super fast paced. You have different characters, each with their pretty unique abilities. Very fast paced, so the benefit of it is that you can just kind of play a run, finish it, and move on to the next run, or just drop it, come back to it another day. You have a bunch of different weapons in the game, but after a few times playing it, you're always going to be finding the same weapons. If this game was done today, there would be like 3 times more weapons. But the gameplay by itself is fun enough that it doesn't matter if you're going to be finding the same weapons over and over again. There's a lot of different secrets, a lot of unique little events you can find throughout the game. It's a lot of these old games have really like specific little secrets that you can find. It's always fun. There's a lot of unlockables, a lot of secret bosses, and it's one of those games that's it's actually pretty unique because once you finish the game and you do a loop. You know, a lot of games just like, oh, well, loop is just like harder enemies. No, in this game, loops have unique bosses that are super different and crazy that you can only find if you've looped the game. And looping the game is really hard. So they put a lot of effort into late game gameplay, which I really love. Today, is this game still worth playing? Yes, I would say. If you like top-down shooters, wild explosion and everything, even though this game is starting to get old in terms of roguelike terms, it's still really good. If I was making this tier list years ago, I would put this as an S tier, and a lot of people would understand. These days, I'm rating it in terms of what I recommend this to people today. You know, it's a good game. It's a high B tier. I would definitely play this over Neon Abyss. So yeah. Okay, next up we've got One Step from Eden. This is a really unique game. This is a board-based, real-time strategy, deck-building roguelike. Kind of. So what was going on is that you got different spells that you'll be cycling through that you can pick and choose, and you're going to be placed on this board, and each spell will be doing specific things on the board, so different tiles and stuff like that. And so your brain has to be working in 2 different ways. First, knowing what spells you're going to be casting and what the spells do, and also moving on this grid while you're firing the spells. Now, that doesn't sound too crazy, except that the game goes 6 times faster than any other game that would do this kind of strategy-ish, almost puzzle games, not really, but it's insanely fast. And when you have a bunch of spells that all have very different like ways that they work, like, oh, this spell only works if you're like 3 tiles away to the left. This spell only works like that will only shoot the end portion of something. This spell only like attacks in front of you. But look how fast things go and how fast you can shoot your spells. Like you can send like 3 spells within like a second, and each of them do really unique things. It's insane. Your brain really has to be in a different world when playing this game. I actually played this in beta. Once again, this was a game that where I talked to the developers. I kind of play tested this game a little bit too, very early on, and so I was really excited when it came out. And overall, yeah, it's really fun. It's not for everybody because it's honestly really challenging, and you can't just play this if you're tired. But I love the art style. You have a lot of different characters, each with their own abilities, different spells, a lot of different passive that each work with each other, which is great. So each build, each run feels pretty unique from one another, which I respect. I do come back to this game every now and then, but I have to make sure that I'm not too tired, because otherwise I can't play it. This is going to be another high B tier. This is a good game. I'm more likely to play the Nuclear Throne, and I would say, yeah, overall it's... I love the uniqueness of it. Yeah, the gameplay is really unique and can be fun if you can manage to play it. Next up, we've got Patch Quest. This is a brand new game, I think, a few months ago, maybe, or I got it fairly recently, with a fairly cool, unique gimmick where you try to tame monsters as you're exploring this huge world. Each monster will have each of their own little abilities. And then you just kind of fight other monsters, and you progress, and you discover new things in the world. It's pretty unique in its own way. But I will say the game does get pretty repetitive very quickly, because what ends up happening is that you're gonna be taming a lot of these monsters, and each monster has 4 abilities each, which is crazy, which sounds like insane because there's so many monsters out there. But what ends up happening is that a lot of these monsters are gonna have very similar abilities from one another, and since you're going to be constantly changing monsters throughout your runs, you're gonna get lost with what each abilities do because they're so similar from one another, and they each have 4. It gets kind of overwhelming very quickly. Also, the unique passives you find through your runs are cool, but you kind of find the same ones fairly regularly. There's a big adventure side of it that is cool. It almost feels like it does feel like a campaign where you expand the world and you discover things from very far away. So there's always this kind of like thrill to figure out what's over there and what bosses are over there. But in my like 10 or so hours playing it, when I would discover a new dungeon, it would feel kind of the same. You're going in a dungeon, you fight a boss, you discover a treasure. Great. Now you go to another location, and going from one location to another gets a little repetitive. One tile is a fighting tile, another tile is just going from one end to the other, and then it's another fighting tile, and then it's another exploration tile, and then it's a fighting tile, and then it's another exploration tile. Blah, 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 blah. It gets a little repetitive, but it is pretty unique. The art style is cute, I will say. It definitely has its own style, which is cool. It's very cute. There's your kind of like your sidekick character that has a really annoying voice, like, oh no, beep boo. I'm like, shut up. But that's not gonna hinder the rating. This is gonna be like probably gonna be like a low B tier. It's not bad. I might finish it just because I'm kind of interested in seeing how the game is going to end, and if it does actually get different. But again, the biggest problem for me is that there's just too many abilities and too many, like, it just kind of gets awkward when you have all these unique animals that all have 4 abilities that you just have to like, okay, how does this one work? And it's kind of fast paced. So unfortunately, even if the game gets even better, I don't see myself putting it much higher than that. Next up, we've got Peglin. Now, Peglin is an interesting game. Now, talk about someone who just wanted to do something pretty unique and turn it into a roguelike. This is a Peggle roguelike. And if you don't know Peggle, you throw this little ball. Whatever ends up happening when you throw out your ball will deal damage to the enemies. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. Just someone having a good idea and you know, make it a roguelike out of it. Good for you. Now, what do you think of this game? There's my first random S tier. Oh my goodness. If you have not played this game, it's just so insane. This game is so good. It has no right being this good. It is an absolute S tier for me. Also, I will say the gameplay is a little old, but honestly, to keep on updating the game, there's new characters, there's new orbs, and oh my goodness, every run is so incredibly different from one another. Totally different builds, different characters, different relics, so many different orbs, so many unique events. Every fight is so fun and engaging. The truth is, even though I don't think it's as much of a masterpiece of all the other S tier games, I always play this game. For the past like few years, I always come back to this game. I've put in a few hundred hours in this game, I think, because I love it so much. It's so good, and they keep on updating it, which is so fun. And there's a lot of skill involved. Like seriously, like it's a perfect blend of RNG and skill, and also being able to have completely broken runs every now and then, which feels super deserved and really fun. It's one of those games that just does things really well in terms of roguelike design, and I really respect it. Pacing is awesome. Right now it does look really slow, but you can speed up the game a lot, which is really helpful when you play this game a lot. So yeah, this is an S tier for me. I'm a huge fan of this game. If you don't know it, go play it. People that know this game love it. It needs more attention. It should get more attention because it probably will, because it's getting more and more updates. And every update, I just come back to it. Like seriously, like once a month or so, they do an update these days. I've also met the developers. I've said how much of a huge fan I am of the game, and it was just so cool for me to actually meet them when I've been a fan of the game. So yeah, complete like left side rating here, but Peglin is amazing. Go play it. Next up, we've got Repetendium Guns. Yeah, this game is very loud and very flashy. You play as a duck. Abilities! Sorry. You play as a duck or different characters that have ridiculous ridiculous guns. So you start off with a particular gun and a particular ability, and then you stick to it throughout your run. Now this is an infinite roguelike, meaning that once you start a run, you kind of stick to it as long as you can, and you just see how far you can go. Now the thing is, for roguelike that has kind of like an infinite aspect to it, there's not a lot. There's just not enough content. It's so stupid. It's really frustrating because this game could be really, really fun, but after like honestly 4 hours of playtime, you've seen everything. Every boss, every enemy, every item, every perks, all the perks. Like a lot of perks have like a unique mechanical design, like like split your bullets in two if something happens, blah, blah, blah. But once you get all these unique perks, everything else is just number adjustments. So, you know, like more attack speed, more damage, more armor, and you get levels pretty quickly, but they're all just, you know, adjusting a little knob and codes, you know, stats. It's just, you know, just different numbers. It is very satisfying the first few times you play it. It's one of those games that you're supposed to feel completely overpowered very quickly, and you do. If you find the right build, you can be overpowered super quickly. You know, on my second attempt, I went infinite. Well, theoretically not infinite, because again, since this is an infinite game, it really does scale the difficulty, but after a while, it just got so repetitive because I felt so instantly powerful that I didn't really pay attention too much to the gameplay, and I killed myself eventually. It is really satisfying for the first few hours, but even though they've done a recent update, I was like, oh, cool, I want to see what content they added. They really didn't add much, and it just felt like the same thing. So, it's fun, but it's going to be more like on a high C tier for me. I loved the first few hours of it, and I very quickly realized that it was going to be pretty repetitive. Okay, next up, we've got Revita. Revita is another classic 2D action dungeon crawler roguelike, and the unique gimmick of this game is that your health is your currency. Kind of like Curse of the Dead God, where everything kind of like becomes a curse. Here, everything you do costs health. Now, this mechanic is really risky in terms of design, because that means that the more comfortable you are with the game, the easier the game's gonna be. But the more you struggle with it, the harder it's going to be. So if you're not very comfortable with this game, you're not gonna be having a great time, because you're not gonna be able to use any of your health to buy stuff. But if you're comfortable enough to be able to expand health, you're gonna get really good items, and then you're gonna be able to keep more health to buy more stuff. So design is really tricky in that regard. Now, what do I think of this game? I love this game, and for those of you who know this channel, you know that I really like this game. I'm planning on doing a 100% completion of this game, which very few people have done on the internet, which is really fun because there's not much information out there. This game deserves a lot more attention because it is packed with content. It just has so much content, so many builds, so many items, so many guns, so many customization from the start. Every run will feel different from the start and will end different every run as well. You have a hub world where you can buy different things. There's a ton of secrets, a bunch of hidden worlds. This definitely took a lot of inspiration from Gungeon. This game is one of my favorite roguelikes these days because I absolutely love it. They've promised an update. It's still not out there. I'm waiting for this update I'm really waiting for this update because I love playing this game. I always come back to this game. I'm still planning on doing my 100% completion on stream because I'm a huge fan. This game does a really good blend, once again, of having builds that feel good and can feel completely overpowered every now and then, but will reward the ones that do feel overpowered. There's a good balance of skill and RNG. It's great. But I would not recommend it to everybody because you really do have to be comfortable with action roguelikes to play this. If you're not comfortable with these kind of games, you're just not gonna be able to buy anything because you're low on health. But this is my new favorite, like, Gungeon. I might put it, okay, I'm not gonna put it above Gungeon because once again, one thing it does have is a lot of bugs, which can be annoying. Now that's only a problem if you play this game a ton, but as all of you who have been watching this stream a lot know, when I've been doing the achievement completion, I've been completely scammed out a lot of my achievements just because of like weird like design like bugs. Also, a lot of item combinations don't work very well, which is a shame. Like, oh, if I have a laser beam and then I have like my bullets split, I'm like, oh boy, that's gonna be super cool. My laser beam will split. It doesn't. It just was not programmed that way. So sometimes you can get let down by thinking that something is gonna work and it doesn't, which is just such a shame because it's such a fun game that you just don't want this kind of stuff to happen. So even though there are these annoying things that can occur every now and then, honestly, it's still one of my favorite new roguelikes out there. Roguelites, really. I would strongly recommend playing it if you're comfortable with these kind of games and if you like these kind of games. Definitely an S tier for me. Next up, we've got Ring of Pain. Now you're gonna look at this game and you're gonna be like, whoa, this is creepy. Yeah, this game is pretty creepy. This is a deck building roguelite with a pretty unique gimmick where you're kind of like on a scrolling board. You can move left and right, and there's going to be two cards in front of you that you have to deal with at all times. So you're always going left and right and facing whatever is in front of you. You don't actually have cards, but all your cards are just your equipment. You're going to be constantly fighting equipment. You have a ton of equipments that you're going to be finding and customizing throughout each run. And there's obviously a heavy focus on the core gameplay, which is really unique, I will say. I love the vibe it's going for, really dark, depressing, like almost horror theme. And I was definitely excited to see where this game was gonna go. Now, when I played it, I thought the gameplay was kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you would find exciting equipment, sometimes you wouldn't, and it would be pretty repetitive. This is one of those games where, unfortunately, the early customization, the pre-game customization, is pretty minimalistic. So a lot of runs are going to feel very similar from one another at the start. So you kind of have to like get started before things get interesting. And if you find unique and cool items, then you can get some really cool builds, and you feel pretty rewarded when you find the right combinations. Once you get to the end of your run, you'll be fighting some bosses that are really creepy and really cool. The music also does a great favor. Now, how likely am I to play this these days? It's fun to see how, like, if it still stands out. And it does have a few DLCs and updates. I don't know if they're continuously updating it today. This is a pretty good deck building game. I think the gameplay is a little lackluster after a while. It gets a little repetitive, and you kind of need to find cool like items in order for it to be interesting from run to run. But again, the visuals are awesome. I love the art style. It's really creepy. It's gonna be like a solid B tier, like a mid B tier. Okay, next up, we've got Risk of Rain 1. This is the OG Risk of Rain. A lot of people have played Risk of Rain 2, have never played Risk of Rain 1. I played Risk of Rain 1 before Risk of Rain 2 was even a thing. I played this game a while ago. I even played it in multiplayer with a friend of mine, and back in the day, there was no multiplayer function that was really working very well, so we had to like make sure we had the right IP. You have different characters, each with their own unique abilities. These abilities will never change through the runs, but the items that you find through the runs is really what's going to change the gameplay. Now, funny enough, you don't really find unique builds every run. It's always going to be, you're just going to be pretty powerful with the same kind of stuff. Oh, this run I got more crit, this one I got more attack, this one I got like more of that. It's nothing super unique, it's just that the gameplay itself is so enjoyable and so just fun overall and very flashy, and you can get really, really overpowered if you get the right combinations, which that's always fun. Now today, does this game still stand out? Can you still play this game and have fun? Especially if you're a big fan of Risk of Rain 2? Yes, this game is still really, really fun to play. I've played it not too long ago, and I've played a ton of hours of it in my life. And even though it's an oldie, it's a goodie. This is a good game, people. It's really satisfying, and if you like Risk of Rain 2, I think you should definitely give this one a try. I'm gonna put this one as a high B tier. Probably like around here. This is a good one. Oh yeah, and they're about to do the remake of it. That's right. They're gonna do the remake of the original Risk of Rain. I'm super excited for that. Next up, we've got Risk of Rain 2. This game is quite popular in the genre, and man, what a change, right? Like, they went from 2D to 3D. That's not something you see very often when you make a sequel of a game. This game was released a few years ago now, and it's gotten a ton of updates, a ton of DLCs, maybe a ton of DLC, but a lot of updates and a DLC and all. And it's very visually pleasing, great multiplayer game, of course. Now, what do I think of the game? I think it's absolutely terrible. No, I'm kidding. I love this game. This game is great. It's an awesome shooter. The 3D aspects work amazingly well. Once again, just like in the last game, you're going to be just choosing from a bunch of different characters. But in this game, you can also kind of change your abilities slightly at the start. But you're always going to be starting fairly similarly from run to run. But luckily enough, it's one of those few roguelikes where even though you start with very few customizations early on, the gameplay is so fun. The core gameplay is so enjoyable that it doesn't get old. It doesn't matter if you don't start with many items. Also, you get items constantly. Same with Risk of Rain 1. You're always going to be giving items. Like, we're talking like 5 to 10 items per level. And each level can last like between 4 to 10 minutes or so. Maybe not 4 minutes, I forgot. It's been a while. But like, you're constantly getting rewards, and there's a ton of items. Not like a lot of items don't drastically change the gameplay, but since you have so many of them, you're constantly feeling rewarded, and you're constantly feeling your character getting stronger and stronger and stronger with their core abilities. And there's a lot of secrets in the game. You can find a lot of different areas, different levels, different biomes, different bosses. It's really fun. Also an amazing game to play multiplayer. That's not going to affect the rating, but I think Risk of Rain 2, especially with the new content that's been added, is going to be an easy S tier for me. I'm less likely to play it in Peglin and Revita these days, but it's still gonna be an S tier, that's for sure. It's also pretty easy to play, I would say. It's not easy to master, but to play, it's pretty easy. Next up, we've got Rogue Tower. Okay, this game is, I wanna talk about this game because this game nobody knows. This is a random game. This is a tower defense roguelike. I've always been a big fan of tower defense games. And I was wondering, hey, why isn't there any roguelikes of it? I think I actually looked it up and I found this game and it looked like really fun and adorable. I love the blocky aspect of it. So I tried it. And oh my goodness, this game is so frustrating because there are such amazing aspects of the game and such annoying aspects of the game. Me and a good friend of mine, we're always so sad when we talk about this game because it has so much potential, but there's some serious just core design issues and UI issues. My goodness, the UI is terrible. Like the UI just kind of pops up and you can sometimes not even click it correctly. It feels like there wasn't a lot of work put into this game, which is a shame because it has a lot of potential. It's really fun to play at first. This is definitely a roguelike. Yes, it is a roguelike, and it's insanely long. Like, geez, like when you start playing it, you get to the second world. So basically, like once you kill enough enemies, you get to a new world. Like the world doesn't change, but there's new enemies you're gonna encounter like every 10 minutes, and there's like, I think there's like more than 6 or 8 levels. So the runs are insanely long. And the main gimmick of this, outside of the tower defense, is that whenever you start a new wave, the way you start a new wave is by increasing the size of the map. Whenever you increase the size of the map, new enemies come in, and then you can place more turrets. Unfortunately, the turrets are not super interesting. After a while, you can only upgrade the number adjustments of each of these towers. So it's not like you can have like this tower do something completely crazy. If you just put more money into it, it just will deal more damage. You can find unique, every end of the wave you're gonna find a unique ability, but even the unique abilities are kind of boring after a while. It's a shame. This game could be insanely fun, and I would still recommend you guys try it out if you like this kind of games and if it's on a discount, because for the little that it has, it's really fun, and the music is so good. The music is so good. It has no right being this good. They put a lot of effort into their music. So I have a love-hate relationship with this game because I think it could be much better than what it actually is, and it's frustrating because I want it to be better. I don't know if it's getting any updates. Currently, it's going to be a low B, but I wish it could be more than that because it has a lot. It has a lot to offer. Next up, we've got another deck building roguelike. This is Roguebook. The unique gimmick of this one is that you are in a book, and the gameplay aspect, you're controlling 2 different characters. There's cool placement, there's cool gameplay in terms of like where they're placed and switching them around and all. So the gameplay is your standard, well-designed deck building gameplay. But the outside world is you're exploring this huge. As you can see right there, you can explore this huge book that you're uncovering little tiles with ink and brushes, and as you discover more tiles, you'll find money, you'll find potions, you'll find more ink that allows you to explore even further. You'll find unique events, and each event is really unique and really transforms the game, which is awesome. And you'll find new cards. So I love the blend they have between the gameplay and the outside world. I love both a lot. Now, the gameplay itself is amazing. They did a really, really good job balancing having 2 different characters with their own cards. Also, when you start the game, this is another game that has great customization at the beginning of each run, which again, I honestly think is really important for any roguelike, especially roguelites these days, to have customization from the start in some way. Here you can choose two possible characters that you're going to be combining. Each of the characters have drastically different cards and abilities. So there are 5 characters in total, which doesn't sound like a lot, but any combination of these characters will create something completely different. So you do end up having really unique and fun runs almost every single time I've played. And I've played the game a lot. I've played this game a lot. This is a game that does a great job, once again, potentially making you completely overpowered. And if so, that means that you deserved it, that you spent a lot of time getting the right combinations. But most of the time, it's a lot of strategy, figuring out which cards will work, which synergies will work. Almost every card can be playable. The balance is phenomenal for this game. I really respect it. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. This game would be an instant S tier for me. That's right, that's how much I like this game. Here's the thing. This might sound crazy, but I have a small problem with it that is going to bring it down an entire tier. I usually am not going to be that picky with my reviews, but this one seems like a small thing that I don't understand why it's not fixed, and honestly makes me so insanely frustrated to the point that I don't play this game anymore because of it. The game, animation-wise, is too slow. Look how beautiful the game is. There's so much care put into like the animations and like the visuals and everything. And in the menu, there's no way to speed up the animation of everything. And unfortunately, they put so much care into each card's animation that when you play a card and you have to see the animation, you have to wait until the animation's done before you can do something else. So even though if you play this game a lot and you know exactly what you're gonna be playing, you want to do this combo like boom, 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 it takes forever. And it sometimes doesn't even register your cards that you're playing because you're just going too fast compared to the speed of the game. That by itself just is so frustrating for me to try to come back to. I just get tired of having to wait around, and I want to do things super quick and just feel rewarded for just doing all these things insanely fast. But it takes so long that I just can't come back to it every now and then as much as I want to. Now, outside of this, again, this is one of my favorite deck building games out there. If you like deck building games, especially at the start, the animation thing is not going to be a problem because you're going to be reading all the cards. This is definitely a problem for people like me who've played this constantly because I love it. This definitely is a template for how to make a good deck building game. So this is going to be an easy A tier above Monster Train, which is again another one of my favorite deck building games. If the animation thing wasn't a problem, it would be an S tier. I would probably also want it to have more updates. It had an expansion, which was great, felt great. I kind of wish there was more, but if they give this new update and they fix the animation issue, this could be a really high rating for me. Let's move on. Next up, we've got Rogue Lands. Now, this might look fairly similar to another game we reviewed. Yes, this is the game I was talking about. That is the sequel to Magicite, I think it was called? Magicite, whatever. And this is a game that I think was done better. Now, this is still a pretty old game, all things considered. It's a survival roguelike, where once again you build your character and you can play with this character for like tens of hours, and then he just dies and your character's dead. Now, at least you have a ship where you can just leave a bunch of equipment behind. So once you get really, really powerful, if you worry that you're gonna die one day, you can at least stash some really powerful items for your next character. This has an amazing sense of exploration. Whenever you get into a new world, you're really curious as to what's going on in this new world, what you're going to be facing, what new creatures, bosses, and stuff. It's one of those old games, again, that really has a lot of secrets. And also, it's one of those old games where you kind of need to look things up if you want to go further into the game. Because the game does not give you any information. You kind of need to know what's going on if you want to progress. Now, there's a great sense of discovery. And I would still say, if you want to play a game like this, come in blind. But after a while, if you really want to go further, you're going to have to look things up, in my opinion. But again, that's not always a bad thing. It's kind of the style. I played this game a lot back in the day. I think when it was released, so this was a while ago. But these days, I played it again on stream. And then after stream, I was like, you know what? I want to continue. And I continued, and it was fun. And then my character died, and I was like, well, I'm done. Yeah, the gameplay itself, the fighting is fairly minimalistic, but it's fun. It's rewarding.
You definitely can find some really powerful weapon randomly. You just kill an enemy and then you get a really cool weapon. You're like, oh my goodness, that's insane! And so you get really rewarded when you get lucky like that. So it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. This game is pretty good. And I would put this in a solid, like, high B tier. Next up, we've got another oldie. You could just look at that trailer. Look, it just feels. I love that old trailer. This is Rogue Legacy. Even just by the name, I mean, come on. This is a classic, and it's your classic 2D dungeon like action platformer game. What is there to say? It's nothing too unique since, you know, it's one of the first in all things considered. But it has a pretty unique gimmick where each character you play comes with like their weird quirks, sometimes negative, sometimes positive. Once your character dies, you play a new character. You play a new sir of something, and you try to explore the game more and more, and this like uncover new areas within the castle. Yeah, I played and completed this game. I think I even did like the secret bosses and like the hard mode bosses a while back, and I remember having a blast. I played it again fairly recently, and yeah, it hasn't aged super well, I would say. Also, I kind of struggle with these 2D platformer roguelikes for some reason. I'm very comfortable with like platformer games in general, like the Celeste and stuff, but for some reason when there's action involved, I kind of struggle with the battle system sometimes. This game does feel a little clunky in its battles. So yeah, this game definitely did help bring back a lot of roguelikes again. It's definitely a classic for some. These days, I would put it as a C. Again, it's not a bad game. It's just a little old, you know, that there's better games to play these days. And speaking of, you know, better games out there, well, we've got Rogue Legacy 2, which came out way later, I believe. I don't remember exactly when, but this game came out a few years ago and is getting constant updates. Constant updates, which is great. Actually, no, wait a minute. Scratch that. I played this when it was in early access or when it wasn't fully released, and so it was constantly getting updates. I think now that it's fully released, it's getting a few updates here and there. First off, animation, visuals, all that stuff, art style, much cleaner, much nicer. Of course, it's a modern version of the game. A lot of people love this game, and I understand. I just personally have a problem with this game. I don't like the gameplay. I do not like how it feels. I do not like how the weapons feel. I love the bosses and like the boss designs, the level designs is great. I just don't like the fighting. I find it very clunky. The weapons don't have any weight, so when you swing something, it doesn't feel super impactful. Personally, the knockback is weird. I just have problems with the core like fighting of the game, and I know that's a me problem. I'm completely aware of that. I've tried to put so much effort into liking this game because it feels like an amazing roguelike. I think that there's a lot to it. There is a ton to it, and I would definitely recommend so many people playing this. I just don't personally have a lot of fun playing it, but I think it's the kind of game that every year I'm going to try to get back to it and see if I actually enjoy it, because there's a ton of different builds, a ton of different characters to play, a ton of different bosses, a ton of different biomes. I don't think there's like a crazy amount of passives you can find throughout each run, but there's a big building factor. There's also kind of like a Metroidvania aspect to it, where you discover abilities throughout each run, throughout like your runs, and then eventually they'll be permanently upgraded later on. But yeah, I have a problem with this game, but I do understand that it's really great for some people. Similarly to Crypt, this is going to be similar to Crypt and the Necrodancer, where I know that they're great games. I just kind of have problems personally with it. Okay, next up we've got Scourge Bringer. Scourge Bringer is a very fast-paced action roguelike. And okay, so if you've watched my recent video on roguelike design, I've talked about this game a lot. I think this was a great example for a lot of negative things that have about these kind of games. Now, first off, the game looks great, music is great, and the gameplay, the core gameplay is great. Like when you start to run, my goodness, you feel really cool, and when you upgrade all these abilities that you get in your hub world, yeah, you can unlock some really cool stuff. My big issue with this game is that every run feels exactly the same. Even though you'll find unique guns and unique abilities, almost all of them are just not very impactful from one another. Each run is very similar. And so you might think, well, who cares? Like, whatever. If the gameplay's fun, then just play for that. And you're right, a lot of people do enjoy this game a lot, and good for them. My issue is that I think this game should not have been a roguelike. I think this game should have been a completely different game. I think this should just have been like a Metroidvania or something just that's not a roguelike, because I think the random elements of this game are just a problem, personally, to me, in my enjoyment, because you're always going to be finding the same enemies in each world, and since you always have the same build, well, you know, a lot of roguelikes doesn't matter if you fight the same enemies, because you have different builds, so you'll be approaching them differently. But since you're always just going to be dashing around and hitting them, and then like using your gun, you're always fighting the same enemies the same way. So it gets really tiring, personally. Also, a very hard game. I didn't finish it, but I play a lot of it. I play it enough for me to feel confident about my review of it. Like these altars that you see right here, these upgrades are just not impactful enough. Like I said in my roguelike design video, I think that they should have made it so that you start way less powerful. You can't dash around and do all these crazy things from the start, but you get a lot more access to upgrades during the run, and more impactful upgrades. Things that actually really do feel like they change the gameplay a lot. Or just don't make it a roguelike. So I love I love what they were going for originally. I just don't think it should have been a roguelike. As simple as that. But it's still pretty flashy, pretty enjoyable the first few hours. I do like the story. I will say the story is pretty cool. But this for me is going to be, I think, the highest of C's, because I've tried it a few times to try to convince myself that it was a great game. And maybe it is a great game, just not for me. Next up, we've got Shotgun King. What if you make a roguelike out of chess? That's what you get. You're playing chess, but it's a roguelike, except that you also have a shotgun and you're only playing as the king. So you're finding all the white pieces and you're trying to just move on to the next board, and every time you go to a new board, you get new abilities. Every ability, I believe, comes with a downside, so every enemy is stronger and you become stronger, so it gets pretty interesting. It is pretty much chess with a lot of, you know, caveats and a lot of extra rules, and I think it's pretty cool. I like the idea, but I personally thought that it would be more interesting if this is gonna sound crazy. Like, chess players might like hate me for this, but in this game, I think the board should have been different the more you play. I think it should have been more than just the chess board as you continue playing, because even though the gameplay was different between boards because of the unique abilities that you would find and customize, I felt like the board just got boring. Now, yes, this is chess. The board is not supposed to change, but again, this is a roguelike, and they've completely changed the rules, so I think they should have also changed the rule of the board. I think there could have been more. It could have been a little bit more interesting if not only the pawns changed, but also the board would change, because it kind of got tiring personally on my end for that. Also, once you reach the end, you kill the boss. There's just a single boss, to my understanding, and you're done. And then you unlock a new gun, which is, yeah, it's some sort of customization at the start, but it's not a huge one. Each gun is not super different from one another compared to other games. So it's a very like chill, simple game that I could recommend to people, especially if you have like a Steam Deck and you want to play something casual randomly. Yeah, it's a cool concept. If you like chess, maybe you'll enjoy it even more. I don't play chess that much, but I do respect the game for what it's going for. A unique concept, and it's pretty funny. It doesn't take itself very seriously. It's a pretty small game. I would put it as like it was fun when I played it. that'll be coming back to it anytime soon. I'll put it as a C. Next up, we've got Shovel Knight Dig. This obviously is a sequel to Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight, if you don't know, is a very popular, well-known 2D platformer, like an old-style platformer, and they decided to make a roguelike out of it. They made a platformer roguelike. Now, it's really hard to make a platformer roguelike. It's kind of unique, because while the genre is not super unique, it's not like chess, the problem with platformers is that they're kind of puzzles when you think about it. Like, once you figure out how to get to one area, you don't want to come back to this area. And so obviously making an entire roguelite, which is like repeated level design of a game that's all about level design, it can be a little tricky. I actually think they did a really good job in that regard. I think that what they did is that they didn't make a bunch of different rooms. They just made a long, like huge, like single room with a bunch of random level layout elements stitched together. So even though you'll be finding a lot of similar like levels from one to another, it doesn't feel super repetitive because they're all stringed together randomly. So that's kind of cool. Of course, the visuals are amazing. The audio is amazing. That's a no-brainer. Gameplay-wise, myself, platformers are not my favorite genre out there. And again, similarly to Rogue Legacy, I kind of struggled with the fighting aspect of it. Not as much as Rogue Legacy, to be honest. There's a lot of work put into this game, that's for sure. And it looks great. People that like Shovel Knight will probably like this game. If they also like the random generator aspect of it. It's pretty fun. Maybe not really for me. Not to mention that this is one of those games where the runs are not going to feel very different from one another. Again, like you get unique passives and stuff, but the core gameplay is already so solid that it doesn't really change from run to run, which is fine for a game like this because at least things feel different every run just by the way that the levels are. But I still thought it was fairly repetitive after a while. Even though the art is so enjoyable to watch, I thought it got a little repetitive. I finished it twice, and I'm not planning on coming back to it. I'm going to put it as a low B tier. Next up, we've got Skull, the Hero Slayer. This is another traditional 2D action roguelike where you play as this little skeleton that has very basic abilities, but you can change your skull to a different skeleton that has unique abilities. And then you can constantly switch skulls, and they each have really, really different playstyle from one skull to another. So you're constantly playing new characters, but you can always switch between two characters at the same time, which is great. This is kind of like a hack and slash. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of enemies all the time. You're going to be doing a ton of big explosion, big whacks. It feels great. This is one of those games you feel super powerful. It's very satisfying. I played this game when it came out, and I'm still playing it. They released a new DLC, which is great. It was a paid DLC, but it added a ton of new features and a new world and an entire new like expansion world, really. Once you've seen all the skulls, it gets a little repetitive, of course. But the thing is, outside of the skulls, there's also unique items that you can find, and there's a ton of these items, and each of these items will not only have unique abilities, but will also come with unique enchantments that are randomized. So you can find a bunch of unique items with a bunch of unique enchantments with different skulls. The customization is pretty great. Unfortunately, the pre-game customization is fairly limited. When you start each run, you're always going to be starting with the same skull. You're not going to be giving anything too crazy. So unfortunately, one of the big issues I have with this game is that once you've played this game a lot, you kind of get tired of doing the first floor, like the first world with the same skull and like the same tiny little abilities. Once you get past the first world, it always feels exciting because there's a bunch of unique skulls you can find. Also, each skull can be upgraded a bunch of times, and each upgrade you'll get new abilities. Gosh, there's just so much put into this game. It's crazy. Music is cute. I like the art. I like the story. I wish there were more bosses because every world has the same bosses, so that's kind of annoying. Just little small things, but they do add up. But all things considered, in terms of action roguelikes, this is an A tier for sure, and I'm actually going to put this even higher than Have a Nice Death. Probably even higher than an FTL. I really like Skull. This is a really, really good game, and I'm excited to see what they bring up next. Maybe a little under FTL. There you go, right there. Next up, we've got a long-awaited game. This is Slay the Spire. Now, this is a deck-building roguelike. This is the deck-building roguelike. I love deck-building roguelikes. As you can see, I've played a lot of them, even though not as much as action roguelikes. There's not as many deck-building games out there. This is the one to play if you've never played a deck-building game before. It doesn't have anything unique about it because it's one of the first ones that just kind of started this whole genre. This game inspired a ton of... pretty much every single deck-building roguelike has been inspired by Slay the Spire. It's a classic, and unfortunately it doesn't have any new updates, but now I usually don't mention this in my reviews. The modding community is massive, and these modders, kind of like in the Binding of Isaac, have honestly created completely new DLC. So I don't want to have the modding change my rating, because then we could talk about a lot of games. But this one, kind of like Binding of Isaac, the modding community is absolutely huge. It's the only game that I actually play with mods these days, because they have new characters, new DLC, new worlds. There's the modding community is one of the biggest in the roguelike community. They just released a new modding expansion where there was I think 70 modders that have been working on it for years. It's insane. Okay, outside of the modding, how good is the game? The game is a masterpiece. This is the most perfectly designed deck building game out there for me. Every card is perfectly balanced. It's amazing. Every card can be played in many different ways. No one card feels completely overpowered. No one card feels completely useless. A ton of different characters with a ton of different builds. A bunch of relics, which are your passives that you'll be finding through your run that will completely impact and change the way you play the game. So every run is super different. Now, even though you don't get to customize your start, right after your very first game, you'll be given your first match. You'll be given a new card to pick from, and boom, the run is already unique and will feel great. Seriously, this game is absolutely amazing, and this is where some people might be disappointed, but I think personally, this is my favorite roguelike, at least right now. Slay the Spire. I've played it since it was released. I've followed every new DLC, every new expansion. I've been playing the mod. I've been playing a bunch of mods. I have more playtime in this game than any other game on Steam because I absolutely love it, and I also think it's the perfect game to introduce people to the genre, which is perfect. It's the simplest of them all, and it's also the best design out of all the deck building games I've seen. I absolutely love Slay the Spire. The one thing I'll say, I guess, is maybe the visuals are not super crazy and the music is fine, but I don't care. I just don't care. I've fallen in love with this game years ago, and I'm still in love to this day. This is the only old game in terms of roguelike standards that I've played a while back, and I still play almost as much today. I always just randomly play Slay the Spire. I look at new mods. And I'm sorry if the mods, unfortunately, yet do kind of impact the rating a little bit, maybe not so much. This is what keeps me playing it today, but even without mods, this is still a masterpiece. That's an S tier for me. Next up, we've got Solitarica. Okay, this is a deck building roguelike again, but the main gimmick is that you're playing solitaire. Someone just decided, hey, I want to do solitaire, but it's a roguelike. This is a very simple, quick game. It's not supposed to be insanely big. Honestly, this is the only roguelike that I've only played on my phone. And I thought it felt cheap to add a phone game on this tier list, but then I realized that it was also on Steam, so I was like, screw it. Yeah, this is a solitaire roguelike. How is it? It's cute, it's fun, It's casual, a fun game to have on your phone. I've played it quite a bit. I played it actually with my ex because I was trying to get her into roguelikes, and she was like, I want to play like a deck building game. I don't want to play Slay the Spire. She should have played Slay the Spire. So we found this and we played it, and it's cute. It's very unbalanced. It's super luck based, but there's some cool, unique builds you can find. It makes every run is going to be pretty unique. You'll find unique spells, unique cards, and stuff. So, yeah, all things considered, it's pretty fun, especially for a small game like this. I don't know how. Like, I'm not gonna put it as C because I think it does what it tries to do pretty well. I'll put it like put it here. There you go. It's like a low B. It's like cute, you know? Why not? All right, next up, we've got Soulstone Survivors. This is a hack and slash chaos simulator. This is another one of those single level layouts. So you're just going to be stuck in this one level, and you're going to be upgrading your spells and just being more powerful and killing more and more things. This is an absolute mess in a cool way. Things get absolutely chaotic. The trailer is only showing like 10% of how chaotic things can get. You start off the run by choosing a character, choosing a weapon, not really, and you have like different builds you can. Okay, basically, there's not much customization at the start outside of your character choice, but even your character choice, you're going to be offered spells through the run that other characters can find. So there's not much customization at the beginning, but how's the gameplay? The gameplay is very, very amusing, very entertaining to watch, super hectic, very casual and fun, but it gets really old very quickly. I also talked about this game quite a bit on my video, where I say that I thought that a lot of the upgrades you get through each run are really boring. Once you found all your spells, so you find the spells early on during the run, you choose your spells, and once you find your spells, you kind of keep your spells, and after that, all the upgrades are just kind of number adjustments. So, you know, your spells have a bigger area of effect. You do more spells. You have more defense, more movement speed. There's just numbers. So, very quickly, once you found all your spells, it gets more and more chaotic, but it doesn't really get any different gameplay-wise. You're just going to be running around in circles constantly, which is entertaining and very visually pleasing, but it does get old very quickly, personally. I think I mentioned in the video that I wish that the spells, once again, were like maybe more tame, but you could upgrade these spells in different paths. For example, like maybe the lightning strike, instead of doing something completely crazy, you get the lightning strike and it just does a one zap, but then throughout the run you can upgrade it to either zap multiple people, or now the zap creates a cloud of energy, or blah blah blah. Like, I wish there was a bit more customization. It would require a lot more design and a lot more time, but I just thought that the game got a little repetitive. But I can't deny that it is super satisfying to just play randomly if you just want to have a blast and see things explode. So even though I have a lot of problems with it, I'm actually going to put it as a low B. I still think it's a fun game. Next up, we've got Spelunky. Spelunky is one of many of these roguelikes that we've talked about that definitely was a contributor to bringing back roguelikes to this modern day gaming world. It's an oldie, and it's a classic, and to this day, a lot of people still kind of play it. Well, not anymore, because it's the second one, which we'll talk about after. So this is going to be a little controversial. I'm not a huge fan of this game. There, I said it. When I play roguelikes these days, I want variations between runs. For me, a roguelike needs to have something different between runs, and like it needs to have a reason to have the random elements. This game doesn't really have a lot of unique builds, or each run feels fairly similar. Now, to the game's credit, that's not what it was really going for originally, and that's totally fine. That's why I really respect the game, and that's why I think it's totally fine for people to play this game. Personally, I just don't like the style of game as much, where it's just exploration, and like you have a bunch of different worlds, a bunch of secrets, a bunch of things to find, but each run is going to be fairly similar in terms of the character you're playing and the different builds you get. It's also brutal, absolutely brutal. which definitely is part of the game. It's supposed to be absolutely brutal. I struggle with this brutality. Like, I feel like, you know, after you're like on World 3 and you're not super comfortable with the game and you get to World 3, you're, oh yeah, and then you just kind of like get one-shotted by something and like, okay. People like that concept, and if you stick to the game, you really learn every trap and everything. You learn to avoid these like things that kill you in one shot. I didn't have the patience for it. Also, I didn't play this early, which obviously doesn't help. I know a lot of people that praise this game definitely have played it when it first was released. So I respect the game a lot, and then there's a lot to it in this game. It definitely feels like a huge adventure, which is great. But in terms of roguelike, not for me. That's it. So I'm going to put it as a... yeah, no, a lot of people are not going to be very happy about this, but I'm going to put it as a C. I'm not planning on playing this. I think it's more enjoyable today than Rogue Legacy. Next up, we've got Spelunky 2. This is actually very similar to Rogue Legacy. Again, an oldie that made a sequel years later. It came out not too long ago. And what do people think? Great. People think it's really fun. What do I think of it? Okay, to be honest, I haven't played enough of this game to really make a full review of it. I knew I wasn't going to be a huge fan of it because, again, it doesn't matter how great the game is, it's just not my kind of play style. That being said, from the bit that I've played, I've maybe played like 5 hours of it. I had a lot more fun. The traps... I think it was honestly a little easier as well. I think visually it's a little easier to see what's going on. There's obviously even more stuff to find. I can totally understand this being an absolute S tier for a lot of people. I really respect the game. I think they've a lot of work put into. There's a ton of secrets I found online. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be playing it a lot, so I know there's a ton of things in this game to find. It's also, once again, super brutal still. I think the early game was a little nicer, but later on things explode a lot and you die very quickly. I do love the way it looks. I think they did a really good job with the art and all the VFX. I think the VFX actually are really, really, really great. So yeah, I thought I enjoyed it. I could definitely see myself playing it more. I could actually see myself really, really liking the game. But currently, I also haven't put in too much work into it, too much play tile into it. I'm gonna put it as a solid B tier that I might bump up in the future. For now, it's just a B tier. Next up, we've got Streets of Rogue, another classic, as a lot would say. This is a very unique game. It's just really interesting gameplay. You play as, you have a ton of different characters you can play, and then you're just thrown into these like little areas that are almost like tiny villages to an extent, and you can have a bunch of mini quests that you can do in each area, and you have to do different missions in order to progress to the next world. There's a lot going on in this game. Each character will drastically change the way you play the game. Honestly, every character is its own game, almost. It almost feels like every time you change character, it's a completely different way to play the game. Which is good because, all things considered, the random nature of each of these levels is not super dense. Like, you get a lot of random events, but if you didn't have unique, really crazy customization between characters, then I think that each level would get pretty repetitive very quickly, which I do think that the levels are fairly repetitive, but it doesn't really matter when every time you play a new character, it feels completely different. I could see people playing this a lot because, again, they have so many characters that it really doesn't get old if you haven't played each one of them extensively. I'm willing to bet that once you've played all of them, if you complete the game with each one of them multiple times, eventually you'll probably get tired of it. But until now, yeah, this is a really solid game that I've enjoyed playing. I've played maybe like 15 hours of it, so not that much, all things considered. But from what I've seen, I enjoy it a lot, and I'll put this as a... I'll put it like as a mid-A tier. Next up, we're going to talk about Sundered. Sundered is a really unique game. This is a Metroidvania roguelike. And again, you're combining two styles and it makes things pretty weird. Differently from Dead Cells Dead Cells is not really a Metroidvania. This game is just not a roguelike. It just feels like they had a really cool idea visually and like the story and just the world, and they did this awesome Metroidvania, and then last second they were like, let's implement some roguelike elements. And you're like, what? So what that means is, first of all, the roguelike elements, you strip all build, like random build aspect of it, and you only just have the random elements being portions of maps being randomized and enemies being randomized, which just doesn't work. It's such a shame because visually, look at how amazing this game looks. It looks awesome. I've streamed this game just because I wanted to show how just cool the game looks. I remember having a blast playing it just because I was just loving the visuals. But this game has no right being a roguelike. This makes no sense as a roguelike. I don't know why it's like that. Every problem in this game is just the roguelikes. What ends up happening is that the world is not randomly generated. It's just that within the world, you'll have maps, and inside these maps, the platforming is randomized. And also, you'll have random enemies pop out of nowhere. The levels just are not planned to have these enemies at all times. So it's just really clunky. It's weird, and it's frustrating. These random elements just really hinder the game. So with all the positives and all the negatives, it's going to be a low B tier. I think it's a big shame. I played it, and I would recommend it to some people just because of the visuals. But it's a shame. If this wasn't a roguelike, oh gosh, this would be really, really cool. Really, really cool. Next, we've got Tangle Deep. Okay, Tangle Deep is another one of those turn-based strategy board top-down games, if that made any sense. This one I played quite a bit. I played a lot of this game. And what is there to say about this? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I enjoyed my time with it. When I first started playing it, I was really invested, and I learned a lot how to really how to play it. The reason I say this is because, oh my goodness, the amount of stuff in this game is insanely overwhelming. Coming back to this today feels impossible because look at all this stuff. Like that was just one screen. There's like 6 of these screens. I'm not joking. There is so much information. It is insanely overwhelming, even for someone like me who loves strategy games. Even though I'm only talking about roguelikes today, I play a lot of strategy games. I'm a big D&D player, big fan of Baldur's Gate. And it's just like this game was just too much. It doesn't even help the fact that it just kind of throws you in there with all this information with barely any tutorial. So it is overwhelming from the start. Once you get a grasp of it, it's kind of cool. It's kind of annoying because if I'm not mistaken, you're following the story. You have this plot. But since this is like a traditional roguelike, you have a plot that you every time you do a run, you follow this plot. It's the same story. So you go through this dungeon, you go through the same dungeon, and then you go through the same like text line with text with the same bosses. It's kind of weird. So would I recommend this to people that like these kind of games? Probably. It's a lot. I would really not recommend this to many people because boy, oh boy, there's a lot going on. But the people that have played this game a lot definitely love it because I'm sure that once you really know the rules and like every aspect of the game, there's a lot going on and you feel really in control. It must feel great. I've played maybe 20 hours of it and I've tried coming back to it and it was just too much. So I'm going to put this as like a low B tier. Okay, next up we've got The Legend of Bumbo. This game is really interesting. This is kind of like a Candy Crush roguelike, but based on the Binding of Isaac. So as you can see, these are all the enemies from the Binding of Isaac, and everything is cardboard. Now you might think that this is just the trailer. Well, yes, this is just a trailer, but everything in the game is also cardboard. This is gameplay right here. This is cardboard. I love that. I think it's super cool to have unique art styles and these indie games. I love the art style. It's super unique, super fun. Okay, so what about the gameplay? The gameplay feels like it was a little rushed. I feel like this game could have it would have been much better if there was more love put into it. It feels like they didn't finish it, and it's a shame because if they did finish it, it would be really, really good. I love the core gameplay and design of this game, but ultimately, I've played it a few times. I've also had game-breaking bugs that made me lose runs multiple times. I'm talking like 3 to 4 times in my 20 plus hours of playing this game. I've had to like quit out of the game and like restart the game and restart the fights, which is insanely annoying because basically this is a game where every time you have an encounter, the encounters can last an eternity. When we played this on stream, my goodness, we had a turn that lasted, I don't know, like 30 minutes or so. It was absolutely not a turn, like a fight that lasted 30 minutes. You can find really broken combos, but you can also get completely screwed by RNG. There's a lot of luck involved. The moment you start a fight, that very first turn, you can get completely screwed. And depending on that luck, you might lose a run or win a run. So there's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of strategy as well, but I just wish there was more love put into this game. I feel like this game was rushed, and it's a shame because I enjoyed my time with it, but I don't want to come back to it because of all the bugs and the fact that once I've played all the characters, I feel like there's not much left to do. The pacing is kind of weird. The gameplay is fun, but again, has its issues. So I wish I could put Bumbo higher, but Bumbo's going to be another B tier. And like a mid B tier. I liked it. Maybe not, a little less, because I think it has so much potential. It's kind of disappointing. Like here. There you go. Next up, we've got Tiny Rogues. Tiny Rogues is a cute little tiny pixel top-down action game. Almost kind of like a bullet hell. Yeah, it is a bullet hell. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. You get what you see. There's nothing too unique about it, but it's not trying to be super unique. It's pretty cheap, but for this kind of small game, it does these things really well. I like games like these where every time you level up and you get new abilities, the new abilities are really impactful, which means that each run feels pretty unique, which I'm all in for. You have a ton of different characters which have different abilities. You have different weapons, like every run will feel pretty different, but the gameplay is obviously so minimalistic that even though there's a lot of customization and a lot of different runs, ultimately, even with all these differences, the game is not going to feel insanely different like if you play it for 50 plus hours. But if we're talking about a game being boring after 50 hours, that's pretty good. I would say Tiny Rogues is a good experience. Also really fun music. This is not an old game. It's just one of those new games that's trying to go for an old approach, and I think they did a really good job. This is a good game. I would put this as like a high B tier, maybe probably around here. Level variety? No, there's like no level variety. That's totally fair. It's all about the enemy designs. The things do get pretty repetitive in terms of these designs. There's a lot of bosses. There's a ton of bosses. That's cool because the boss fights are probably the highlights of this game. College party looking game. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really what they were going for. It's like one of these small game, but done pretty well. There's honestly a surprising amount of content for a small game like this. I was honestly surprised by how much is going on in this game. And again, like look at these, like the boss fights are just super cool. So yeah, it's fun. Definitely was surprised by how much fun I had with it. Next up, we've got Undermine. This doesn't get more basic than that. This is a top-down dungeon crawler. You play as a miner, you collect gold, you get upgrades. It's a traditional roguelike. Now, is there anything unique about it? Not really. The fighting is pretty basic. You kind of feel a little underpowered from the start. You're kind of supposed to feel underpowered because the point, like the lore is that you're just a random miner that has to save the world, even though you're not supposed to be the one saving the world. So it's kind of cool that you're supposed to feel a little underpowered. But, you know, feeling underpowered in roguelikes is not a good feeling. You want to feel overpowered. Well, I've got good news, because once you get past the beginning, oh my goodness, you're going to feel insanely overpowered. This is one of those games that you can super easily break. It's one of the easiest games to break. It is meant to be broken. There's a ton of items that synergize insanely well with each other. This game has no rights being this good. You have different items, you have different blessings, you have different pets that will follow you around and do stuff. You have a ton of customization outside of the world. This is definitely a huge roguelite. There's different game modes. It's packed. This game is packed. It's crazy the amount of stuff you can do in this game. It doesn't look like much, but it's similar to Dungreed that we talked about prior. It's one of those roguelikes that just looks very basic, that just does things very well. If you want to feel overpowered and get rewarded for having grinded the early game and get to the end where you can just like destroy everything super easily and honestly break the game. I can easily break the game to the point where the game will crash. You can have duplication glitches. I mean, the game even puts their duplication, like their infinite duplications in the trailer. That's how they know that you can easily break the game. This is a really, really, really solid game. This is an easy A tier for me. I've come back to this game many times. A lot of these games that are like roguelites, once you've finished everything and you feel overpowered, there's no real point to come back to it. And then they have like a game mode that's like, oh, it's actually the roguelike game mode where you just go off the main course and do this cool game mode. This right here, Explore Undermine, a classic rogue mode, is actually amazing. That by itself is worth playing. Unfortunately, you don't unlock it until you've grinded, but gosh, this game is good. It's a really, really good game. Yeah, definitely an A tier. Next up, we've got Vagrant. Vagrant? My Frenchness is coming along again. I don't know how to say this. This is another fairly classic 2D dungeon crawler. This is actually a Spelunky wannabe, except that you're an adventurer, more like the classic fantasy world where you have swords and you're fighting bosses. And I mean, Spelunky does things fairly similarly as well, but this really does a lot more. There's a lot more upgrading your character. Not much roguelite element, but like upgrading through the runs individually. You can be a warrior, and through the run you can like be more skilled with axes and or defensive and stuff like that. It's similarly to Spelunky. This is pretty brutal, but I will say, even though I'm not a huge fan of these kind of games, as I said with Spelunky, I respect Spelunky. It's just not for me. This game I had more fun with because I actually had more of a roguelike vibe to it that I personally love, where I was able to start a character and throughout the run get different equipment that would actually change the way I would play the game. You would have to manage the inventory. I think it was more full of there's a lot more to do in each individual run, and each run felt different, fairly differently. And you can also change different classes, which are all completely different from one another. You have different spells. Yeah, the customization is really great. It's very brutal. It's a really, really brutal game. Traps will one-shot you, and it's a Spelunky wannabe for sure. I'm sure the co-op mode must be really fun, but again, not playing these for the co-op. Just looks really fun for a multiplayer game. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm just gonna be honest, and even though I know I can play Spelunky 2 more and probably love it, I enjoy Vagante more. 90% of people out there will put Spelunky way higher than this game. It's just my own opinion. Okay, next up, we've got a banger. We've got Vampire Survivors. Now, a lot of the games we've talked about recently took a lot of inspiration from this game, but also a lot of games we talked about were done before this game. But this is the ultimate single level layout kind of hack and slash top-down roguelike. This is also quite a roguelite, if I may say so myself. There's a lot of things to upgrade. Now, this game is interesting because at first glance, if you don't know about this game, you would think this is a pretty old game and it's pretty basic. Gosh, no, there's a lot going on in this game. I remember playing it before it got really well known, and I was just so blown away. Like, I would play a level, I'd play a character, it's like, cool, that was fun. And then I find a new level, and then a new character, and then they're completely different, and then new builds, and then new stuff to do, and then new secrets. Gosh, do you know how many secrets there are in this game? Some of them you actually have to type in like actual codes, just like the old, just like in the old days. Like, it's really committing to the old-fashioned vibe of video games. It's really fun. I mean, gosh, this game unfortunately did not help the trend of terrible app games that are just trying to scam you out of paying a few bucks here and there for terrible design, because, gosh, this game does it so well. Yeah, if you haven't played Vampire Survivor and you like these kind of automated games, yeah, there's only movement. That's all you're doing. You're just moving around. It's very satisfying. It's not supposed to be a game about like perfect balance or perfect like strategy. It's just a very satisfying game that's always keeping the audience engaged because there's so much going on at all times and a lot of new things to do, new maps. Music is great. It's great. It's a good game. It doesn't look like much at first, but this is an easy A tier for me. I'm not gonna put it as an S. I'm actually gonna put it right about here. My Steam wishlist is getting bigger the longer I'm watching. Good. Next up, we've got a Vault of the Void, another deck building roguelike. This game has this unique gimmick. It's weird. It's complicated to explain. You get stress meter. You have to manage your stress. Like, health is not everything. You have to manage your stress, and the more stressed you are, the more enemies you can find. Anyway, I'm gonna be straight with this game. I don't like this game personally. Again, like all these games that I've bought, they all have very positive reviews. But this one, even though I've played a lot of deck building games, I was not a fan. I thought the gameplay was boring. I really didn't like the art. I think things just didn't feel alive when you get into the actual gameplay, when you're fighting using the cards. The board does not look very interesting here. Things just didn't work out for me. And outside of this, the world environment is not very visually pleasing to me. But again, the gameplay for me was just, I didn't love it. I've played maybe 10 hours of it, and it just wasn't for me. Maybe if I stuck to it and I saw different combinations, maybe it could be interesting. I forgot exactly the specifications of why I didn't really love it, because it's pretty complicated. It has pretty unique design choices, but wasn't for me. Maybe I played it during a bad time, but yeah, this for me is going to be probably on the high D tier. Again, even the D tiers I don't think are bad games. I just don't think they're for me. Voidigo is our next game. Voidigo is I guess like a top-down 3D-ish shooter game action. It's very chaotic, very visually like pleasing, I guess. I made an entire chapter based around this game on my video game analysis video on the Roguelikes. So you might know already what I'm going to be saying. This game's great. I think it does a phenomenal job at having all the different upgrades and items that you find be super unique and actually change the gameplay, as opposed to just changing some random number value like attack speed, defense. No, each item is completely different. Like, you're barely going to find any item that doesn't completely change something visually or gameplay wise, which does make things completely crazy. Which is the point of the game. This game is supposed to be insanely chaotic. What you're seeing is what you get. It's a lot to look at. It can get a little overwhelming at times. I will agree that sometimes I kind of get like, oh gosh, especially when you repeat loops. when you repeat loops, you have so many enemies and things explode everywhere. It's one of those games again that is pretty easy to break. I've had it where my frame rate was super low, and I guess I like these games. I like the games that allow you to break the game occasionally. It's just satisfying, you know? Even though I really treat balance very highly, I think balance in games is very, very important, especially in roguelikes. I think games that manage to allow the player to become insanely powerful every now and then is very, very rewarding, which is, I think, something Binding of Isaac does insanely well. And this game does really, really well too. You can feel really powerful a lot of times, and it will feel very rewarding. I think more times than a lot of other games. It's on the verge of being a little too much. It's gonna be like probably, yeah, around here. Good, nice A tier. Okay, next up, we've got Warm Snow. Now, this is a Chinese hack and slash roguelike. It takes itself very, very seriously, and luckily enough, it does it really well. Sometimes I think roguelikes that try to take themselves too seriously kind of get goofy and just don't work. But this one does it really well. The trailer is in Japanese. It is in Chinese. I don't think many people know about this game. At least in the US. This is a really good game. This is really fun. You feel really powerful. Another one of those where you can get completely overpowered. But this is one of those games where everything is overpowered. You're going to be overpowered. Enemies are going to be overpowered. It's just very visually crazy and impressive. Also, you can read this, but like the abilities, like the passives you get, are like, you randomly find something that's like, oh, increase your damage by 300%. You're like, what? Which does sound absolutely ridiculous, and it is. But everything scales really fast, and everything is overpowered. Now, you might think that this sounds like a balance disaster. Surprisingly, not so much. It's not the best design. Like, it's not the balance is okay, all things considered. But it is really enjoyable. And at the end of the day, making sure that you can have a good time multiple times when playing this game. Like some games, if you feel overpowered constantly, then you're gonna get bored of it. But I play this game a lot. I've played this game a lot, at least. And I've always enjoyed it. It's also because you can start. You have this great pre-run customization. You can start with unique. You're always going to start with a unique boon from a different god, which will, for the rest of the run, tell you what kind of elemental damage you're going to be doing. So it's kind of like choosing a different character. You can start with a unique relic that will synergize with it. So you get a lot of customization from the beginning, which is great. Visually, it's also very impressive. Unfortunately, this is a game that, again, the bosses are awesome, but they're always the same bosses, which does... I think it's important for roguelikes to have different bosses, at least action-based roguelikes, or not even, just... I think it's important to have different bosses, because you're always fighting the same ones, which is kind of disappointing in that regard. But outside of that, it is a really solid game, and I'm going to put this as a very high A tier. I would recommend people, if you like big, like, action, crazy, hack and slash games, give it a try. It's a good one. Next up, we've got Wilder Myth. This is a turn-based strategy game where you play different characters on a big board that you can move around, and it's kind of like a Fire Emblem style gameplay. This has a big focus on the plot and the story and the characters. You are always going to be given different options and different scenarios, different characters to have relationships with. You can even choose whether you find, like, from when you meet a new character, you can immediately choose whether, like, oh, do you want them to potentially be your partner or just your best friend? And you're like, okay, cool, got it. So there's a lot into the story and the characters. And I like these kind of games. I unfortunately just didn't really stick with this one. This was recommended by a friend of mine who really had a good time with it, and I always trust everything he plays. And I could imagine myself really liking it, was just a little slow for me. I think I could definitely see myself playing this again and sticking to it and actually really, really loving it, because I really like the idea that, yeah, there's a huge emphasis on the story and the decisions you make and like different characters you'll meet and the relationships. I love it. The art style is, you know, some people like it, some people don't. It's supposed to look like, you know, it's kind of like on a board game. It's a 2D sprites on a 3D environment. It's all right. Personally, I just didn't fully stick to it, but I could imagine this being a really solid game for those who were fortunate enough to stick to it. Personally, yeah, I'll put it as like a low B tier. I could very well see myself put this in A tier one day, just not today. Maybe some other time. I'll put this like here. The very, very last game is Wizard of Legend. Now, you might think, sure, okay, this is just a random game. I have a soft spot for this game. I've played this a lot. I have a big history with this game. I played this very, very, very early when it first came out. I was there for every single one of their updates. I played it with a good friend of mine. It was a game that we played a ton on stream. This is a hack and slash top-down game where you play a dungeon crawler, where you play as kind of like this avatar figure. You can choose different spells. You feel super powerful. It's super flashy, super fun. Ton of different builds. Today, what do I think of this game? Well, I think it's good. I think it's really good. I'm a little disappointed because I've played this for so long, and today I just wish they kept on updating it. It's one of those games that could so easily be kept updated, but it's not getting any updates anymore. I don't know when was the last update. Every time there's a new update, things feel fresh, new, and exciting. This could have like a huge DLC. This is one of those games that I know could get a huge DLC, and I would love it. Because unfortunately, after having played it a lot, it does get a little boring after a while. But when I'm saying like after a while, I'm talking a long, long, long while. I just wish I could want to continuously come back to it. I can almost play it again today, but I've done everything in this game, which is good. And maybe that's fine. I just want more. I love this game so much. I just want more. Now, in terms of really getting into the design of things, the level layouts are pretty mundane, I think is the right word. They're very generic. The level design is super generic. It gets very repetitive. There's different level layouts that you'll be encountering constantly over and over again. And unfortunately, you're kind of just running around from one part of the level to the next, just fighting the same enemies over and over again. Luckily enough, the gameplay itself, the core gameplay of having these unique spells and items, make these repetitive, mundane things really fun. So that's great. So it could be an easy S tier if there would be more updates, and if there was a little bit more level variety and potentially more enemies. But this is going to be a very, very high A tier for me. Probably around here. Again, like I gotta say, these high A tiers are huge games for me. Like I'm putting S tiers as like my favorite games like of all time almost. Yeah, honestly, most of these games are some of my favorite games of all time. So these games are really big. So Wizard of Legend, my final game of tonight, is going to be a high A tier. I'm pretty happy with how this is standing right now. Yeah. Woo. Oh, that took a quick second. Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much for sticking around. This was something I've been wanting to do for years. Again, roguelikes are a huge part of my life, even professionally. If you haven't checked out my my huge video on game design for roguelikes that was recently released. Links should be in the description down below or on our channel. Yeah, and if you disagree with my list, yeah, please feel free to let me know. I'm always interested in hearing people's opinion, and I honestly like all of these games to an extent. Like, I respect at least all of these games, even if some of them I didn't really enjoy playing. These are all very well rated games on Steam, and this is why this was such a hard list to rate personally. But yeah, my back is killing me, and I'm really hungry.